Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Back to back, once again, we are pleased to present our National Grand Sheik, Tarik Bey.
Tempted. Anyway, glad you all come out again. Take notes, please, take notes. As I was thinking earlier, you know, when I was upstate New York when Dr. Naila called me, and as you already know, we always usually plan on the next classes. And I chose comprehending Decisis and Judicata, so write that down. And as I was thinking, you know, a lot of people don't look at principles in law, in jurisprudence, principles of positive law as spiritual, but actually it is in its nature spiritual. And I think, and when I say spiritual, I don't mean, you know, the art of breathing, which is really what spirituality is. I think very often when people make reference to law, what they refer to as spirituality usually has limited or no reflection in their mind relative to, you know, the human experience, the human interchanges. But as I was thinking about it, it actually does. Because actually, you know, like when people talk about the Bible, Septuaginta, Quran, Waspi, the four Vedas, the different books that in the different aspects of their nature may deal with moral and ethical principles, although they have other stories and dynamics relative to human interchange. Generally, most people approach those books with the intent of measuring moral and ethical principles. And they choose to call it spirituality, though that's not exactly correct. You know, but Decisis and Res Judicata is representative of positive law that has been laid down in a legitimate, or what you call de jure, court of justice. Whereas the principles of nature's law and nature God is laid down in harmony with human experience. And we very often call it the common law, which means the common law in its nature harmonizes with the natural order of justice, or what men would call fair dealing without bias, prejudice, or negative intent. And therefore, in its character and nature, offends none. Meaning that you can pretty much, excuse me, deal with humans on the planet, anywhere on the planet, and deal from a common law perspective and not be offensive or unjust because it's harmonic with human nature. Meaning that there's certain, you know, we like to sometimes, in our arrogance and poisonous self-righteous attitudes that we adopt in the names of religion. I'm saying that like that because it's like true. Not to insult anybody, you know, but, you know, those words are just thrown around loosely and really don't embody the qualities that they imply. Well, whatever. But, you know, just like you can kind of, you know, like when you're, like if you're in the woods or something like that and you run into a deer or different animals and you see some of them run, and then sometimes you can run into animals and they don't necessarily run, and it's according to the energy that they pick up from you, whether you're hostile or want to eat them type thing. And, you know, humans in many areas are very sociable, but at the same time, they're very predatory oriented. And so, because in their relationship with other beings, so many of them have a tendency to immediately go into this hostile energy of wanting to hurt something. They don't need a good reason. They just do sport type thing. And so animals and other living beings have learned to be wary of humans. Basically, humans are dangerous in many ways. And it's not, I don't feel honestly that it's in the nature of the humans as so much as it's been a learned process or taught process, not really in the nature of the beings if they're not tampered with by corrupt agendas and then learn over generations these things. Sort of like, you ever notice how like little animals or like little babies in a crib as an example, if a parent is looking at the child and the child is doing something basically that the child is curious and stuff like that, but if the child senses, and it's not always verbal communication, that the child is doing something that the parent disagrees with, you'll see it in the child's eyes. The child will automatically respond to the psyche of right and wrong without going to some mosque, church, synagogue, or praying with some guy on the hill hugging a tree type thing. Meaning that when you really study humans, they know right from wrong, they're born with it. Although we like to try to give credit to these guys that, you know, that always are selling gods. In truth of the matter is, not really, but, you know, we like to do that. It's one of our flaws. However, res judicata harmonizes with those fundamental divine principles that you need not argue with. Meaning, if you have no untoward intent, you wouldn't argue with what you just know in your heart is right. So when you're talking stare decisis and res judicata, these are law cases that are measured by fundamental divine or common law principles and are what you call precedent or established law. Now, you may have other cases that may come up that might be subject to litigation that has a justified purpose of litigation because there's some variable aspect of it that needs to be examined, that the aggregate can be moved around, and so therefore it's disputable. Stare decisis is undisputable, I'm clear. This is where the principle is cleaned off the table, and you know, if a case comes in or before the justice, and that harmonizes with certain fundamental principles, we need not spend 5 hours discussing it, or 2 hours discussing it, or 3 hours discussing it, or beyond the time that it takes to put it on the record. It's done. Meaning, sort of like, it's not unlike having two powdered crystals on the table, one salt and one sugar, and you know it's debatable type thing, and so that would be, you know, you would litigate that because they look a lot alike, really, you know, so you're not going to just throw the stuff in your coffee type thing, and so you might do one of these things. I think that's salt. That's cold. So we need to argue about that. That's salt in that kind of sense. That would be stare decisis. All right, so if we've established that this is salt over here, right, in the future, we don't argue this. Meaning that, you know, I really think it's really Santa Claus dust. No, let's not go there. You know, you got 5 lawyers saying it's Santa Claus dust. Well, Stare decisis say, you're not going to waste the court's time with your BS Dorf. Maybe in some other cases or some other stuff that's worthy of litigation. Stare decisis, no, we're not arguing this. Now, if you want to argue this, now you're liable. Now, you can go ahead and play if you want. Do you want see now? So now, if you want to argue now, the liability is on you, or clear, because it's not arguable. So that's stare decisis. One of the things that I wanted to bring up, when I was went to the trek, Memory Day, Memorial Day, that we like to call it Day of Memory, in Philadelphia, in Shakamoxon. And they take people on tour, and Grand Sheik Azim from Temple 11 in Philadelphia, 5th and Dolphin, and they do that, Hopkins Bay, and they do that every year. His father started that years ago, and we used to do the roundtable tour, something like 25 years ago, and which we're going to do again in the near future too. But when I went to the tour, then we went to the dinner at this majestic hall. And at that time, some of you might see a video on that they put up where some grand sheiks got together, offered me to another table, and they did surround me, casting spells. They don't know the energy that I carried. I ate my meal and enjoyed it because I had a globe around me. They have no idea what they're messing with, but they like to have fun. And I was kind of chuckling inside because they kind of remind me of drunk kindergartners, to be honest with you. And they were attacking me, saying you can't mix that stuff with the prophets' literature and stuff like that. And that's the dead arm of the law. That's when I first heard any one of them openly admit that. Which I'm usually not surprised, because I can see through them most of the time anyway. And not that I was looking. Because I was more or less enjoying the moment, enjoying the meal, enjoying the people, hundreds of people out there. And then you have a lot of people come from around the world during that time, and they take pictures and from different nations, and they take pictures with the Moors, and then the policy enforcers, they block off the streets and make sure everybody gets around. It's really, really beautiful day. But anyway, because you already know they're upset as we bring this information to people, around the country, and particularly from the House of Reawakening Minds. And also to remind you, Dr. G, because, which you're all already aware that they have a fan club in China and Japan and everything. So a lot of Chinese and Japanese, when they come there, when we're doing the trip, they come up and they want to take pictures to take them home and stuff like that. Because they're the world is glad that these people are waking up somewhat. Well, that's another story, but we can get into that later. Mm-hmm. But anyway, when we're doing the dinner, they use beautiful food, really, after the trek. And I was sitting at the front table, and a few sisters asked could they sit at the table, that whole great big banquet hall, and had round tables. So we're sitting at the table, and the sister said, well, can we sit here? Everybody want to talk. So I was talking to the sisters, they were getting information. They were totally supportive, and asking for information and stuff like that. And I heard that you got this flash drive that you all send people around the country from the House of Reawakening Minds, and we want one, and how can we, all this stuff. Right? So now the grand sheiks are walking around, some of them, doing their peacock walk. Now you know me, well, to be honest with you. Because I'm very tolerant, but I also have this humorous side that I can't help. So I'm trying not to laugh, trying to do that kind of look or whatever, and eat at the same time, and I'm trying not to laugh at, because I'm reading them, see. And so I could tell they were a little uncomfortable about the extra attention. Right, let's put it that way, extra attention. And the sharing, because they already know how blunt I am, you know. And so I already know the energy, if you get the point. So whenever I come around, they're always threatened for this ridiculous reason, but they are, whatever. You can't say that, and you can't tell them that type of stuff. You know, they're not really in those degrees and stuff like that. And you can't mix that stuff, and that ain't really what the, you know, that kind of stuff. But anyway, so they sent envoys over for me to come to the far table on the far side of the banquet hall, over in the other corner. As a matter of fact, exactly oblique to the other side of the corner. And I said, well, I'm not finished eating, I'll come over there. So I'm eating, come over again, send another envoy. You're invited over to the corner. When I'm finished eating. Right, about 5 more minutes, because I don't rush, you know. Another envoy. You know, they really want you to come over into the corner and stuff. So I pick up my plate and my ginger ale and head for the corner. I sit down, everybody gets up and they're standing, they make this big circle around me. So I'm sitting at the table pretty much by myself with all people standing all around it. So I'm eating. Oh, well, enjoy your meal. I was. Yeah. So I could immediately feel the energy, you know, multiple energy. So they made the circle and they're casting these spells, right? Like I don't know. You know, they don't know the kid. Anyway, and so I'm feeling humorous because I know what they're doing. And then I'm also feeling humorous because I'm thinking to myself, they really don't know me very well. You know, so I'm eating the meal, and so they get comfortable and they start throwing the barbs. Now it's really getting humorous to me, right? Because I already know how to flip them, you know, mentally, but I don't deal with that negative. You understand what I'm saying? I resist that negative because that's one of my own therapies that I have to use for my development. You know, because on that other side of me is a Frankenstein. You know, so my own therapy is always to try to do good, don't feed into the negative, because when I do, it's very strong. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So that's me fighting my lower self. You know, but I laugh to myself because they don't know the real Frankie. You really, really, and I'm not saying that for humor. It's just like part of the energy that I came with when I came out of the service, because when I came out of the service, and I until recently, I never talked about it too much, you know, not to deal with that energy. But my whole dedication to the heart, to the bone, was to become an assassin. I'm an expert with all kinds of weapons. Get it. And they were preparing me for that, although I didn't know it until later after I went AWOL, when I went to a psychiatrist. You know, they send you, in the break, they send you to a psychiatrist. But I was dedicated to go back to California and to Texas. And I don't hide it because it was that strong in me. I put it this way. For over 3 years, I used to wake up in the middle of the night grating my teeth. That's how bad it was. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So determined that I was starting to take astral travels. You know, and I recognized it was going to the negative. And then when I held Hannibal in my hand, my son, and I had to make a decision. And that's why I didn't go back. But it still took me a while, even later, to if I say purge it, I'm lying. Although I purged a lot of it to control it. You know what I mean? And so a lot of my inner dedication was to convert that anger to love, to convert that vengeance spirit to doing some good. Because I know that a lot of good families would have been in misery with what I was planning to do. And I had brought weapons, I did. I went to El Paso, because I was on the borderline. I went to El Paso, and I got two of the weapons that I'll admit that I got was a Crossman 130 Tarik pistol and a snub nose 38, and I take them underneath my locker. And I would get in fights almost regularly just to get started. And I would always get Article 29s, and they would, like in the service, if you're fighting with somebody, you go to the break automatically. And I never thought about it immediately until later, and it had more to do when I came to Jersey, not then, as to why. When I found out they were actually preparing me secretly for special services, and I didn't know it because I was so good with weapons and stuff like that. And what they thought was intelligent. I didn't see myself that way. Do you understand what I'm saying too? And then when they were still in the finances I was sending home to my wife, and when she had to move, and I didn't find it out till later and all this stuff, when they hurt her, my whole energy changed. I turned black inside. There was nothing they could have done with me but die. And that was my energy. It really was. As wrong as it may sound, that was what it was. And they had no idea. While they were rationalizing with me, I was intelligently plotting to kill everyone with a bar. And so much so that I was going to come back and get them. I went AWOL in Texas, in Fort Bliss, came to Philly, went to the barbershop because I'm also a barber. General finance, got my wife together and stuff like that. But all the time I was like this different person because I couldn't wait to get back to get them. Anyway, they sent NBA MPs, and I don't even know why I'm talking about this because it's not subject matter. But anyway, up on Byron Street in Camden, FBI and MPs came and took me Fort Dix gunpoint, right? And I was smiling to myself because I'm getting ready to get them too. But this is the major thing. Principle. And that principle that I saw in me, because I always try to be a decent person. And when they abused my wife, it was like nothing else mattered. They were going to die. And anyone who protected them were going to die. But the dedication I made to myself was no innocence. No innocence. That dedication, that when I came out of there, is what I do now. Indirect story, true. So for people who wonder why I'm so dedicated to what I'm doing, it's therapy. Like for real. That's suppressed Frankie Stein. They didn't know Frankie Stein was sitting at the table while they're throwing these barbs. But it's also on another level, because I also have another level of mental that they probably didn't pick up. They know I think they know I'm psychic, but they don't necessarily know how far it goes, because I don't never show it. But they shouldn't mess with Frankie. However, That's why I chose Decisive. Because actually we're, what people like to call spiritual battle, we're in a spiritual battle. Like for real, like for real, for real. And what I recognize too is that people who like to refer to themselves as common people, I don't. You know, we're all here to learn, and we all here have to learn to, you know, like it said, and it is known and it's a fact that we must know our higher selves and our lower selves. And it is very true. And which is really why most of you are here, why most of us are here. Because we're here to get fixed, you know, on another level. The fact that a lot of people aren't aware of that necessarily, you know, I can't argue that, but I'm pretty sure that I know that. You know, so I try to share whatever I can to help people, if I can, you know, to inspire them to help themselves, you know, by admitting certain things that most people won't admit about themselves or about the circumstance of the human condition, and not being afraid to talk about reality. Because if you're not going to deal with the real condition of the human species, you're not going to solve any problems. And we're in a situation where we really need to deal with a lot of these things, because while we've been busy, put it this way, while many of us have been busy playing these juvenile games in the name of religion. Now, I say that exactly like that because it's exactly true. The priesthood who have presented these games to us have been plotting to kill the people off. And the truth of the matter is that the people have very little defense. Now, that's really just the truth. But they do have, little what you would call, I would call aggregate defense, but they do have a strong defense that most are not aware of, and that's only because most of them aren't what they themselves have been calling spiritual, and therefore lack the defense. And it is a known fact by those who are plotting to eliminate them or to make them sick, both of which they've been doing, not going to do, they've been doing it. And because of the misdirection that has been promoted onto the people in the name of religion, it's not knocking religion. That's, you know, let me make myself clear. Because I'm so blunt about that, a lot of people try to say, well, I'm not religious. You know, but I already know that what them people are getting is not religion. You know, so let's get that out of the way. From the door, they get dogmata. The same way when we show the demonstration of what money is and what money is not, same principle. You know, which is why most of us, when you study us and you look at the problems that beset the humans, why the confusion, the wars, debate, you know, the hostility, even down to families, in the name of whatever God they got to sell you. They're always selling them. They're never free. That's only because they're idols anyway. You know, but the people haven't accepted that reality yet. They're still in their juvenile state of development. However, there is help along the way, or energies along the way, to try to help them up. But the other problem that we have is that there's been this kind of energy cutoff time somewhere around late 2012, 2013, that I recognize, you know, as you travel the country and you talk to different people, even people that kind of know some of this stuff, that you'll see a lot of them appear not to be aware that we've had a cutoff date, not that it's coming, that we kind of had a cutoff date. And when I say the cutoff date, it's not so much a date like, you know, January, Bibelfetzer type thing. It's an energy kind of thing. And when you're talking to a lot of people over a period of time, you can start seeing whether or not they're picking up that energy by the conversations they choose to embrace, the seriousness or lack thereof of how they approach life, how they treat other people, little subtleties that appear norms. If you're more sensitive, a lot of things that appear norm have multifacets that you see and you're more sensitive to it. You know, but the point that I'm making is the concepts that people have about what they've been told that God is totally incorrect. That's number one. I'm just cutting through the chase. Not that I'm going to get into it as a subject. There's actually a lot of other energies that have been competing with each other for us on multiple levels. Some for food, some for aid in development, and some they want to get rid of this problem once and for all with these beings that appear not to be willing, not that they're not capable of, willing to evolve. I'll say it that way. Energy cutoff was around late 2012 by the calendars that we use here. Early 13, about the time when the Pope did the motu proprio. And he did the motu proprio, and I would say not accidentally at that time. I would, even though no direct communication with him, I already know he's a high priest. And I already know most of those priests are psychics too. And although they, for the most part, are very selfish, and many of them are very evil too. They're not who you think they really are. And half of them aren't human either. So I'll tell you that much too. And that's not a knock on them, it's just what it is. You know, now, by many of the people who choose to call themselves common people are not aware of that. You can tell that they're not aware of that. Why? You know, like you can send some of these guys out here and they've been getting away with it for quite some time. They come out and say, oh, Jesus, Allah, Prophet Muhammad, and these people start giving them their lunch money. No, you know, I'm just saying as an example. And I'm not knocking them either. I'm just telling you what's really going on. What's really going on. Because when you really tell the truth, you make a lot of people uncomfortable. They don't like you very much. And particularly those who have been feeding, I call them feeders, because they are. So they kind of don't like me. I don't care if they don't like me, but I'm just saying. So when I'm around feeders, you know, there's this energy that comes out. You know, because when you come amongst people like that, you know, languages, this is how we're communicating. When you get around a bunch of people who really know the arts, you need not speak. Things are done mentally. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, like messages, counter moves, psychic attacks, parries, everything. I mean, a lot of stuff be going on in the air. And people who are not like, if you see some of these battles that these guys do, and some women too, but you know, and someone who really is not aware of those levels can come in, you could almost feel like thick air in the room, and they'll feel very uncomfortable. Some people will make them sick. I'm just telling you like it really is. But you come around some of them, and if you have good intentions for humans, they get angry. They can smell you. They can feel you. They immediately, the psychic attacks are almost like, you know, cloud rain. It's like that. Is what it is. And it may not appear on the surface related, but that's why I chose Decisis and Judicata. It would be good if you write down the common law, write down the common law, And when you're looking in your law books, all of them, and always use your multiple law books so that you can decipher. Because remember this, discernment, decipher. Write that down, discernment, decipher. Because when they present to you a definition, like say in the Black's Law Dictionary, Ballantyne's, Bouvier, any of the dictionaries now, the major power dictionaries, Bouvier and Black's Law, etc. It doesn't dilute from the other law dictionaries, but those are the major ones that will be used by scholars. Although they'll use all of them, and many of you will have multi law books because you're aware, and then many who start coming around us for a while start investing in themselves to make themselves erudite in those areas by necessity, not just because it's interesting. Understand that they will, like for condensation, they will remove a lot of the preposition words, and they'll keep what they choose to call the meat of the definitions, and then interject stare decisis law cases within so that you can have further reference for later study. So as an example, in stare decisis in Black's Law Dictionary, this is 4th edition, page 1577, stare decisis. As an example, stare decisis, Latin, to abide by or to adhere to decided cases. That's the fundamental meaning, while we're clear. All right? Now, from one who's studying jurisprudence, you don't have to start analyzing that for them. But for someone who's not familiar or less familiar, they start having to burn smoke, thinking, what's that really mean, type thing. And, and we want to get kind of look beyond that a little bit, you know what I mean? Now I'm going to read a paragraph or so, and then I'll explain to you what I mean by condensation, and removals of a lot of your prepositional phrases and stuff like that, prepositional words. So the paragraph starts off, policy of courts to stand by precedent and not to disturb settled point. All right, so now if you want to interject, it's expected. And remember, when you're trained in jurisprudence, it's expected that you have 2 tablets in your mind, and while you're reading, you're double reading. All right, so this is what you'd be doing. All right, so I'm going to remind you of this so that when you're studying your law books, all right? All right, point. Policy of courts to stand by precedent and not to disturb settled point. The double read. Stare decisis is the policy of the courts to stand by precedent in all cases relative and not to disturb the settled point on the principle. And if another case is in that category and the principle is the same, there's no need to disturb the issue. It is already settled, for it is on principle. That's what that's saying. All right, so that's how you read. So you double read, and so I'm just telling you so that you'll know that that's how you read that. All right. So what you want to do is to train your mind so that when you're reading a condensed law, that you're recognizing that certain times subject of the sentence is omitted, assuming that it's already interjected in the mind of your statement in the structure of how you're reading it inward. But while you're looking at the physicality of the reading, that's abbreviated. So, but you're not supposed to, if you're teaching, you look at that, but you add the subject matter and the prepositions again so that it's, it's like condensed milk, you add water. All right, you get that point? That's what I'm trying to say. So think that way when you're reading your law books, all right? All right, good. So stare decisis is essentially, you would get into the metaphysical constitution of man. And so when you're dealing with constitutional law, you're dealing with what is called the make-up of the nature of being, or the I am of man. What we like to refer to as the higher self or the higher spiritual character of man, that we aspire to attain. We may use what we choose to call religion to do that. Those not given. The promise is never given, hardly ever given. Which is again why the human condition is to what it is. Which is another argument, but part of my argument with this crap. The principle that if it's constitutional, these categories, they make a bin, or what you call a line of cases, and stare decisis goes over here. These are more or less your purified apples. Now, we got all these apples here that just came in the truck, and we can pick through them. That would be called litigation. When you're refining, say, crystals, right? Refining crystals, like in North Carolina, South Carolina type thing, which is where you get a lot of crystals. And you take buckets of mud, or you're refining gold or something like that, or some precious metal. You have this aggregate that you call dross. General, well, the dross is the offshoot, the stuff that you're no longer using. And you filter it out, and you get all the precious stones out and everything, and then what's left is called the dross, right? So that's in law, that would be called litigation, right? Stare decisis would be like if you go to a beach and you're just picking up a bunch of stones that you're looking for. They're all out in the open. They're just in the sun doing their thing. Oh, I know it's not a diamond, or two, or three, or four. Like, really? That's stare decisis. You get the point? Or when you're digging and you hit what they call a mother lode vein in the mountain, you're leaning, I've been digging all day, and I only got these few grains and stuff. I'm just so tired. You lean on something and all this stuff falls down and it's all pure, don't even need refinement. Stare decisis. Res judicata. It is settled. Which means we don't have to argue this. We can argue this. No, you don't argue this. Nah. So you come into a case that they would call a constitutionally settled case, because stare decisis almost always is a case that's settled constitutionally, proven due process, proven on principle, not arguable. You don't need to, like the 2 and 2. You got 2 and 2. You don't sit up there all day and you're going, call a few more mathematicians in here so we can discuss this. 2 and 2. Oh, come on, we really got to argue this. No, you don't. No, you don't. You're not pulling that off. So it's stare decisis. Got that? Go ahead. Give her the mic.
So is the stare decisis, would that be equivalent to, I guess, that positive law
exactly.
in the U.S. Code?
Exactly.
Okay, and so then the litigating would be the non-positive law.
Yes. Now, you know that jurisprudence is the science that treats of positive law, and actually, like what we call generally law, constitutional principles, come under the category of jurisprudence as opposed to the reverse. Because a lot of times when people say the word law, they think that is the title and then other things are subtitled. Jurisprudence, laws are subtitled. You know, now it is in principle. What would be the opposite? It would be called de facto, color of law, color of office, color of authority, to give you a demonstration of its opposition, although that is not jurisprudence. Interesting, that's not jurisprudence. If you get the point, because jurisprudence deals with positive law, which means that which is erudite to truth, has veracity to honor. It is in the nature of the integrity of nature's law and nature's God, which means there's no need. You already, you know, like some things need to be explained. Like, nah, no, you don't need to go. Don't go there. Don't play dumb. You know, you can kind of go with that. Point made, and the direction that I'm going into is when you start going into a lot of different subject matters that we choose to go in, discovering, not really, but disappointedly recognizing some people being very uncomfortable with it, when you know in your heart and their heart that they know damn well you're telling the truth. Just because they don't like it, they will look for the crowd to condemn the truth, because they have been supporting the lie and they know that the mob has been living under that lie, and they're looking for that support, not on justice, not on that which is right, not on equity, but on democracy, which is mob rule. And because the masses, particularly in North America, have been living under democracy operations for so many decades, that you begin to recognize is that they hear about it, but they apparently don't know what the Republic order of operations are or is. You know, it's just a conversation. You know, intellectually, data, I mean, they can look at the data and accept it, but it's not in the spirit of their being. It's not in the energy of their language. It's not reflected in how they deal or respond to or reflect upon or interface with people who have been representing themselves to them as their government. And when you bring up issues that are injuring the people, you discover that many of them are not aware of the origins of their injuries because they can't see through these people. And if you bring it up and start saying truth of what you see, not only will the actors attack you, but the people you're throwing the life raft to will attack you too, because they think they know what they're dealing with. They think that these people love them. They think that these people are their government. And as a matter of fact, when you're talking about principles, or what they call due process, it's another great example. When you're talking due process, and when you're talking about the nature of the American Constitution, which was adopted for the Constitution for the United States at North America. The principles existed before the order. Do you understand? And those are common law principles, nature's God, nature's law. So they won't say to you that that is the hermetic law of the divine order of the ancient ones. They'll say nature's law, nature's God. People can accept that. But that's what it really is. It's rooted in hermetic law. Do you understand? Partly. And on another level, you would say that its origin is Muslim law, right? However, most persons who claim to be Muslim from a creed perspective appear not to be aware of that either, or to be living it or practicing it either. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Because people like to, in their mind, many people like to think that they're special in their God concepts. And one of the things that Prophet Muhammad said that I often examine on multi-levels, and he said, when man unfolds, his God unfolds. Study that on multiple levels. I'm not going to get into that right now, but study that on multiple levels. When man unfolds, his God unfolds. And that's another reason I chose stare decisis and res judicata. And then recognizing a lot of times when you get into conversations with people that they don't recognize where you're at with this, which is another reason I got this, because the average person should recognize it when they see it. They should have been told. They should have been taught. They should have been made aware. You know, when you have such a profound and rooted and grounded and divine-oriented documents such as the Constitution for the United States, and then recognizing that so many people speak around it, and you can tell in their energy they haven't picked up the energy that's in that instrument. And then you look at the conditions around with the people, and you see that this is the beautiful empty vase that they polish and put on a shelf. And that's about as far as it goes. And much of the miseries, political, economic, and social, that they suffer, not recognize that this was put in place as a shield or a security to protect them from the things that they're suffering. It gives them nothing. It secures what they divinely already have. And recognizing that that concept is not promoted so much among the people, and recognize that many who get into it have not come to appear to have absorbed that, which means they have not digested it. They surface read it. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Again, stare decisis res judicata. In the nature, same nature as when we did de facto and de jure. You know, comprehending, understanding, understanding, overstanding, opposing forces, opposite poles. You know, and so when you're talking ordinary case litigation, everyday litigation, stare decisis res judicata will be those cases that need no litigation. If you have a case that harmonizes with them without any other tributaries or any allonges attached to it that can be arguable, stare decisis, you're in and out, it's no argument. Are we clear? What we desire in some small way is to share with you certain information that aids you into respecting yourselves enough to come to the level of recognizing some of these things without it being debatable, and that it becomes a part of your lifestyle, that it becomes a part of your thinking, your automatic thinking processes. Because on the undercarriage of what we do, that's pretty much actually what we seek to do. Which is also why very often, at least for myself, you won't see me going into a lot of different subject matter that I'm capable of going into that would be absolutely interesting, but to me would be useless to you if you don't know certain spiritual bases of everything. My position would be that all of us share with each other that we become no followers of no man, but become helpers of each other.
That's right.
And capable to do so. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Like, for instance, if I'm navigating the bus and we're going cross country on a tour or something like that, and we get a flat tire, and I go out, to change the tire, and everybody's sitting on the bus, and I'm jacking the bus up and to get the tire off, and I get the tire off, and the jack slams down, falls on my hand, like really Al, the real Al type thing. So I can't operate the bus now, and so I wouldn't have to say, "Is there any bus drivers on the bus? Somebody can drive the bus." And everybody get it from the child on up to grandma, whoever's sitting first one in the seat, jump over the seat. That's what we're seeking. Whether it's possible, I say that it is. I say that we should seek to make that as practical as we can. And for those who may not understand our objective, that is part of the objective of the operations here at the House of Reawakening Minds. So sometimes when we get into certain subject matter, we'll go into multiple subject matters. That's what we're seeking to do, so you'll understand motive. Because if you understand motive, you can kind of forgive us for some of the skipping, or going into different subjects, or even being duplicitous about certain things, because really what we're trying to do is purge on certain levels, because we know if certain levels or plane levels are cleaned, that the other's nature herself will pour the stuff in. So we see, if you understand how nature really works, you don't keep trying to clean all the doors. If you understand how the chambers work, you clean certain key doors, and nature you don't try to do the moon's job. What you do is clear the earth, and then make sure the earth that you're putting the seed in, whether it's alkaline or acidic, in the nature of the seed, and get it planted, and let Venus, nature, and the sun do their job. Go find something to do. And once and I'm trying to, in my little less than qualified position, that's what I seek to do, to liberate humanity in many areas where you see that they're really self-enslaved, and where others are enslaving them or seizing upon their mental servitude mentality, and are jealously fighting to keep them there, and angry at anyone that tries to loosen the gate, which is basically what we're dealing with. And that's not playing self-righteous either, so let's not get that, because we all have shadow work to do. So when you're looking at your higher self, and this is again, when you're looking at the ancient studies of the higher self and the lower self, the awareness of it, the battle that we're all here to do. And so that they always say like this, when you're pointing over here, 3 of the fingers are pointing back at you type thing, which is like true. So, yeah, yeah. So, being aware of that. And so you always be humble, when you're analyzing things, so that you're also first giving yourself your own mirror. And so always working for the good if you can, and try to do that which is right because it's right, not because you want a brownie cookie. And don't be disappointed if you don't get one, because it's not why you do what is right. You do right because it's supposed to be in the nature of being. Anyway. So stay decisive. Now I'm going to read this out and then interject if you choose to. Give it a mic.
Islam Grand Sheik.
Yes.
With all the information that you spoke of, two key things that stepped out is known spiritual. Does not define the principle when you talk about known spiritual. And you also, your last statement that when his man unfolds, his God unfolds.
Yes.
That also brings me to, when you come into the knowledge of self. Like you come into as soon as you come into just the knowledge of self, just like the first process. Then there's stages that one goes through. It's like the baptism.
It is a baptism.
It's a baptism. And then I was talking to Brother Hassan Gaziel, and he was like, well, let's go to the metaphysical aspect of the word baptism. And we was reading the word baptism, which is a Greek word, and it talks about how the baptism has been displayed in an outward appearance to the public, but it's a ritual, but it's actually an internal process.
Yes. You
have to let go, and then it pour in consciously. That's the baptism. So then you get to that next level of, that's the pouring in the truth. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that when you start pouring in that truth, you have this conflict with others who are not where you're at in the trial.
Exactly.
And then they want to pull you back down
into the dirt.
Exactly.
Yes, and it's true.
Right. And so it becomes even amongst the ones you have connected with within the movement. You think to yourself, gosh, I thought that you would be far ahead of me, because you say you've been XYZ years, but I see that obviously you haven't been through a baptism yourself.
Now that's the shadow work.
Yes.
That's the shadow work. And this is back to understanding the multi-level statement where Prophet Nubudrali said, when man unfolds, his God unfolds. The interesting thing to look at while you're looking at that is recognizing that which is by divine rule parallel, and that is the transitions of the outer wheels, or what we call the clock of destiny. And this is where, because we're creatures of habit, and because our visitations, cyclical visitations, and we use these different vehicles at different times, and we get used to the short span of the different vehicles and forget that that's not us, although that's what we chose. It's like you choose your mother type thing, And we know in the nature of the physicality, the harmonies of chronology, then we look at our mother. So mother is like a walking calendar. And so on an aggregate surface, we look at woman as a calendar. And then we look at our chronology, and then we make up social calendars that do not necessarily align with sidereal planetary energy movement, which is more mathematically correct, or what people would call metaphysically correct. The culture is to understand the sidereal nature, actual position of the aggregate we see from the earth plane, planetary energies, positions, and then with a calculation of their energy relationships with each other and how it reaches us and how we reflect, because we are transceivers. Now, when the truth of that is taught, that's religion. But you know that the priesthood has pretty much hidden that from the masses and converted it mostly into an anthropomorphic format for children. And then kept the adults on that anthropomorphic level.
Pre-drowning. Let me drown you.
Which is part of our problem. So again, and then, but when you're looking at the outer wheels, the farthest most of us look is Pluto. Most make no calculation on what some have come to know as asteroids, all of which are not necessarily rocks. that they think they are. Then you've got to look at the densities in this particular solar system paradigm as it travels in the greater spatial format beyond, as we look into the condensation of this solar system, you know, from Mercury, you know, to Pluto, and measure by that. The real measurement is not limited to that. And what you see, and this has more to do with man unfolding, God unfolding, sidereal calculation distinguished from our political calendars, which we set politically, but we know that they're not true. Is when you start thinking they're true, that's when you're in trouble, if you get the point. And then when you lose a consciousness of the sidereal positions of the sun, the moon, the stars, then you're in trouble. And in that gray area is where the priesthood have made a home for themselves to rape humanity and to rape the planet. And they become very well established. Point, though, that needs to be taken into consideration. We all have forgotten what we all say all the time, and that is coming of the age of Aquarius, the outer wheel. You know, so they become cliches. However, the reality of the sidereal energies are what they are. Those energies do not sit around and consider what our beliefs are. They're stare decisis. It is do not disturb is what it is. And if you're not harmonic with that energy, no big deal. You can choose to grow and evolve to higher planes, or you can become fodder for the coming life. That's the rule here. That's the rule. Your opinion is irrelevant. Whatever idol god stuff you made up this week that you converted to because you found a new one, have fun. Nice suit. You know, and this is what it is. And I feel that with many of us, as we begin to evolve and discover that reality, become uncomfortable, and then trying to find our place with this whole thing. Some feeling lost because they have no reference point. And this is the danger of the priesthood not really teaching the truth of what religion is and what it is not, what got them their ecclesiastical degrees, the misrepresentations that they have made of ancient Judicata, that they call falsely Egypt, and the real dynamics of the culture, the cosmological nature, were actually, however, point that I'm making in reference to this, as man unfolds, as God unfolds, when you study us, we like to be secretive in our speciality of our sandwich. God knows us best. And, you know, I like the smooth jelly on my peanut butter sandwich. My God makes the best peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I get amen. Everybody says amen because they're all into this. But some people ain't into peanut butter. You know what I mean? They're like, you know, apple butter and stuff. You understand what I'm saying? And nature doesn't recognize any of that. That's the point that I'm making. What we need to do, what we need to relook at is start looking at nature and seeing what she has always said and how far we've gotten away from her, and start recognizing our own folly without doubt, because what she has shown and what she has established on the Earth planet and in this particular solar system is called Hermetic law. The phenomena that operate in this life format that we call life, the phenomena that operate in this universe is called Hermes Trismegistus, sometimes called thought. You know, what they call in ancient Judicata. You know, and some of these things are symbolic, but that's essentially what it is. And when you come to what you call to the honor of principle of the Constitution for the United States. What I recognize is that a lot of people are not aware that the essence of that Constitution has origin in ancient Egypt, in ancient Hykupta, and is ancient in Hermetic law. However, what you see when most people are reading it, their mind goes to Madison, Thomas Jefferson, you know what I mean, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and their concepts is that the construct came from them. It did not. It was handed to them. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? But anyway, go ahead.
In relationship to stare decisis, decision to stand, positive law, it is settled, in res judicata.
And it's sort of like when they say, you know, like if we're going to
finish,
philosophy.
my brain gonna
Oh, go ahead.
wild. It's gonna go crazy.
Right.
Okay, so stare decisis in res judicata, in relationship to the maxims of law. And one of the first maxim of law, it talks about what no man has created. First in time is first in line.
Yes.
So if that's a maxim of law that is also connected with the Hermetic principles,
Exactly.
why isn't that being upheld as first in mind, first in time?
Now, then we go back to the last week before last lesson. De facto du jour. The very nature of much of what we do. The very nature of real and fake. The very nature of truth and falsehood. The very nature on a political scale, operating at North America. The distinction between the republic and the real motives as to why those men calling themselves Congress, who were members of the Bar Association of England, overthrew the republic secretly, but didn't, I didn't say they didn't have the guts, but they, meaning that if a man feels his position is right, and he feels that he's being just, he does not hide his position, he does not veil his position. He stands on the mountaintop and speaks truth before friend and enemy, trusting that you appeal to the very nature of their being to see whether it has veracity in the nature of life, and certainly not reject or rebut that which is by nature obvious, meaning that what man would want or desire to do to another man what he would not want done to himself. That's stare decisis. That is not something that is contrary to the nature of all living beings. When you cross that line, you know when you're crossing that line, meaning that, like, if you're as an example, say on Hallows Eve, you know, when they're, you know, giving candy and stuff to the children and doing that, but you already know that celebration, harvest celebration, has another thing too. But you also know the dark side uses that for harvesting too. Mm-hmm. So you got to understand that too. So all of those things really are going on. The same way you would not, well, I can say that you're not, but I mean, I can't say what people would do if they're not. You know, just like when you see little babies coming in, you know, they candy and stuff. You know, how could you any less than, you know, want the child to be happy? Do you understand what I'm saying? You don't even believe in the holiday, but you give them candy, you know, because they're happy. And you're happy that they're happy. And you see them in their little costumes and stuff. How can you be anything but love with them? But some people looking at them like food. And some people look at them organ opportunity. We're talking like for real. So we have beings on this planet that have a humane spirit, and then we have beings on this planet that have legs and arms, but they're not human spirited. So this is a problem. And it has been a problem. The problem is that many of the humans have not been aware of that. And the more and more you look at this stuff, the more and more you recognize that they're not aware of what's on this planet and what's in the planet. and some of them don't have enough sight to see what's around them, and therefore they have no nature of defense. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Whereas nature herself would aid them if they recognize that defense mechanism is a natural thing. But we are so far out of harmony with ourselves by virtue of the dogma systems that we've been promoting generations in the name of religion, not recognizing that they were actually weapons. And this is what I recognized at a very early age, that religion has been weaponized. And as I grew up, I was reluctant to say it, but I always sensed it. And as I got older, I just started acknowledging what I saw and start recognizing that people don't like you if you say what you say. So my point of it is, the point that I'm making is, what can I do in the little bit that I do to be worthy of having breathed some of this air here? And to be worthy of the pains that my mother went through to bring me here, to give me an opportunity to breathe and to experience some things on this plane. What can I do to make things a little better? At all, as minor as it may be. And that is to maybe try to inspire people to be not afraid to think and to be more respectful of themselves, and not to be narcissistic in their introversion of looking at things. And sort of like that, and because what I recognize is, for me, I don't know, see, because I can't speak for others. From my experience, so I can speak of my experience. The more honest you are with yourself, there's another level of vibration that takes place in nature, where nature actually connects wires and literally teaches you right out the atmosphere. Right out the atmosphere. Now, that may be my lunchbox, but that has been my experience. Trying to inspire people not to be afraid to do that, and then see what we can do with what comes out of that to help make this earth a better place. Plus, it needs to be done anyway, because shut-off time was around 2012, early 2013, and while we're kind of slow getting where we need to be, the tolerance level, the will to be tolerant for us to evolve a little bit more is kind of shut down. If not shut down, it's very, I think, my honest opinion, without going into thought on it, is there's been enough show amongst enough, though very few, of the humans to buy us a reprieve, though that wasn't necessarily the intent. I mean, it wasn't done deliberately. It was a look back and seeing that it's something worthy here to save. Other than that, I'm telling you, I'm really serious about this, that the shut-off time has already happened. And that we haven't experienced some other things that may be uncomfortable for us. I think that's why some things haven't taken place. Not that it's not in the cards to have taken place. So my thoughts are, this is my thoughts, my personal thoughts. For whoever has any of that energy of other dimensions, it's time for them to step up their game, to try to save what's savable here, even though it may not be appreciated or even comprehended. So you know you have limited time. You already know that the people's attention span by design is slightly past 8 minutes because they've been tampered with that much. That's not their nature. Understand, that's not their nature. They've been tampered with that much by the dark priesthood. So you're operating on multi-battle levels all at the same time. So you have to be a clear thinker even with your faults, while also working on your dark side, trying to clean that mess up. Do you understand? The lower self. Anyway, go ahead, Dr. Knight, Dr. G.
Islam, just on what you were just talking about, the fact that we've been tampered with, and so therefore have, very little attention span and so forth. When you consider that the ancients were able to pay attention to the movement of the stars and the constellations and so forth, to study over eons to make the observations that they did, we have been given, and we're able to do that consistently in order to establish, precedent, so to speak. But we can't, because we, like you said, we've been given so many things to distract us and to pull us, to this point, that point. Every time you look, you're bouncing. We have what they say, monkey brains, because thoughts are going from this to that. We can't stay focused. And those things have been done deliberately to keep us to coming to the conclusions that we need to, in order to reconnect ourselves. As we're reawakening minds. House of Reawakening Minds, which is part of our mission and purpose, is to just not so much to teach anybody anything, but to remind you of what you've forgotten, what you've been distracted from.
Yes.
And with regard to and you were talking about the stare decisis and the constellations, I was thinking in terms, when you were talking about that a little earlier, we have been given those truths about the constellations, the stars, and so forth, have been reduced to horoscopes for the people to look at something that you view something through a lens that we've given you, instead of what the ancestors and the ancients would do, would be to study and to see those connections and patterns and to be able to connect them back to life now, not only now, before, and life to come. But we get, we're reduced to the funny page section of a newspaper, where they don't really have newspapers much anymore, but a comic type, comic relief version of what our ancestors did. Seriously.
Yes. Now, and this is, again, when we talk about just the fundamental ephemerides, just simply being a part of the culture, and even when you're dealing with a fundamental ephemerides, you're still dealing with comparatively aggregate cosmology, that it gets into quad complexity of numerology, numerically. The humans are capable of it, but the tampering is that deep that it's difficult to get them on the aggregate base. However, the aggregate base itself is enough to save them. If you can get them to just shed their idol gods and stuff, because that's really their dead weight. The very thing that, it's an interesting thing, because when you look at this, the very dead weight that humanity has carried for generations is actually the polar, not opposite, but polar to their concepts of these God games that they've been playing. In other words, what they've been seeking for what they call their salvation has actually been their destruction. It has been their God has been their demon, and they haven't recognized it. And I know it's harsh for a lot of people to handle, and a lot of people are upset, particularly people who are addicts, upset when I go there in different things that I've written over time to share with people, because it threatens them, because it takes their hands out of these people's pockets. You know, they can't, how do you say, they can't fill up their houses and rape these people, selling them these different gods that never worked anyway, but the people have believed that these gods have been working for them. What can you do? And I asked myself that, but it's kind of not exactly that the way I asked myself, but what can you do? How many layers can you pull off before they get you out of the way to make humanity see so that they themselves will take up their responsibility to themselves and to anything that they call love and be real with it? Whereas where nature recognizes their vibration, because when at that point, that's when nature comes. See, because you're never really alone. But it's just that we've been so contaminated that we kind of stink to nature, and she's been kind of like, I didn't make that type thing, almost. And so the fate of the living that's so harmonically out of balance with its creator forces, or some people call it source, some people say Allah, some people say God, Yahweh, you know, Tetragrammaton, you know, tree of life, you know, different names, the ineffable, you can't speak, whatever. But it's really a combination of all the elements of building elements in the universe and the forces of nature, which is really what people choose to call God type thing. But they can never give you a specific because they don't have it. Do you understand? But in that confusion, they promote other confusions. So what is it that we do know that we can present that can help the development? Meaning, if we don't know what 10, 100, million, 1,000, quadrillion, billion, quadro, cotillion notes are added up, you know, 10 times. We do know what 2 and 2 is 4. We got that much. Let's work with the 2 and 2 is 4 back then, and work it to a point of pseudo perfection that we can actually help things here. Because when you really study nature, she's really compassionate and patient. It's just that because we have free will, we're just so arrogantly out of order. That's what our arrogance is probably more of our problem than just the lack of knowledge, because our arrogance actually blocks the pineal gland, which is a pure cone that does not bend to these things that we keep doing. And she herself just jumps in, not unlike if we're in the woods and we're looking at the different plants and, you know, edibles, medicines, different stuff like that. Just messing around, and then you pull up a rock and you notice this little beautiful plant was under the rock, and it's clearly not been in the sun because it's very little chlorophyll in it. And then you come back the next day and it's all green and it's coming up. It is not unlike that. You know, when you expose something to the nature of Venus and the sun and the moon, you know, they do miraculous things. You know, you don't need to ask it, it just is. And if we would just be true to ourselves and just try to be good people just because it's right, not because we want anything. Nature herself comes and heals. You ain't gotta do no sandwich, you know. You don't have to do none of that stuff. You really don't, you know. And I think it's kind of hard to get across to people with that because yeah, right. No, I gotta really do the moonwalking. Really, you know, all this, and, yeah. You gotta hold your finger in your ear for 5 seconds, not 5.5, 5 seconds, say hum, doo-doo, and you know, it'll work. You know, I just don't feel nature really appreciates that stuff that we do. and that we just need to be, just like our mother brought here, ordinary people, respecting nature, respecting living things, waste nothing, take no more than what you need, do unto others as you have them do unto you, and nature pretty much comes in and takes care of the rest. And when you get outside of that venue, you're starting to get false. And that the common law is rooted right in that area. And it doesn't take, genius, let me do some metaphysical meditation of trying to, you don't have to figure that crap out, stop. And I think the more we do that, the more common things that are in nature itself and in human endeavors, is just like an automatic. We blocked it with all our bullshit that we're not admitting is bullshit. That's it. Stare decisis, from a case law perspective, harmonizes in that area, and is the clean category of aggregate principle. Meaning, cases like this has already been settled. It's clean. You don't have to polish it. We're going to deal with all these stuff over this pile over here. Got to decipher it. But stare decisis is clean. It's over here. It's in the warehouse. All that stuff. The other point that I wanted to make, and the interesting thing, Tam, do you have one of the judicial proclamations?
I have it on my phone.
All right. Now, this is the interesting thing. When I went to the Majestic Hall, we went to dinner, I mentioned jurisdiction outside. Like they made a video and chopped it up because they were telling Taj, they were straightening Taji guy out, really straightening me out.
The name declaration?
They made me tie my sneaks together and all this stuff. Whatever.
On the judicial notice?
Yeah. I want to read, but anyway, they also made videos and told people that the information that we put on the judicial notice was a lie, and that it was getting people in trouble, getting people killed, and said it was a lie. I just want to remind you all that there were 13 cases is not limited to that. Do you understand? Are all stare decisis cases. And what was interesting to me is their open public willingness to attack them and literally call them lies. Now remember, these are grand chiefs of the Moorish Science Temple of America who essentially were put in place to enforce the law. And when they openly make videos and call this a lie, it indicates two things to me. COINTEL operations, direct and know it. And the other, so extremely ignorant that they have no business having those titles. And the other, combination of the both. And this is for people who, and not so much those of you who study, who take the time to do some work, for those who may be influenced by the appearances of conflict or positions that will definitely show themselves all over the planet. And it's two things because of, not only because of Saturn and Uranus, that means all things, no rocks and no shadows live well in Aquarian light. So all institutions, all persons, corporate, living, and the dead, are exposed for whatever their claims are, or whether they purport to be, or whatever they seek to hide is in the open. And I know that makes a lot of people uncomfortable too, and I would say that some of them who should have known clearly forgot. Or some of them who should know have been so busy fooling other people that they're not aware of themselves being exposed. And they get angry when people see through them. And I think that, when I went to Majestic Hall and they circled me and were during those psychic attacks? Because I could read through some of them, because it was a lot of them that had very good spirits that were there observing but not participating. But the interesting thing, watching the psychic attacks go, and they were just bing, bing, bing. It was, it was sort of like, I kind of felt like sitting at a table with a bunch of drunk kindergartners throwing toys at me. And not noticing that it was a glass shield around me. And upset because I wasn't upset. And I wasn't actually angry at them. And I wasn't going to come out and fight them or anything like that, but just observing their anger, was very interesting. I was probably looking at them in a totally different energy than they were looking at me. They were like gnashing teeth angry at me. And the truth of the matter is I kind of felt sorry for them. Because if they knew the energy that was in the room, they were actually getting deeper in trouble. And if anything, I was trying to protect them. Really. Because if you let it go, they may as well take a rope and hang themselves. Because they're not getting that off anymore. The fact that they don't even recognize, and they're supposed to be adepts, they're supposed to be spiritualists, and not recognizing certain energies tells you two things. They're extremely unqualified, or they're really dark. But then, even being really dark, they should have known they weren't going to win. Not with this one. Maybe somebody else. Not with this one.
It's wrong.
So, it's sort of like, as weak as I am, I'm strong so far. I'm so many degrees above where they are that it surprised me that they were so low in character. To their own injury, not to mine. I wish it better for them. I trust that they will be well, but if their thoughts, some of the thoughts that I picked up, if they were really there, they're hurting themselves and probably won't make it through this year. They have no idea what they're messing with. What were you going to say, Tam?
No, you just asked me about the,
Proper making.
Go ahead, yes. Now keep in mind, this is res judicata, and this is what some grand chiefs that was led by the Wolfpack leader named Sharif said is a lie. Remember, this is res judicata. Go ahead.
okay, I'm gonna start at the Islam. I'm going to start at the sentence right before it goes into this is long. It said, in reference to the rights of the natural people and their substantive rights, etc., the following are pertinent and established Supreme Court decisions, stare decisis, and res judicata, to wit, the right to travel. That one is on the State versus Armstead, 660 S 778, 779, and 781. The use of the highways for the purpose of travel and transportation is not a mere privilege, but a common and fundamental right of which the public and natural beings cannot be deprived. Chicago Motor Coach versus Chicago 337 Illinois 200, 169. Okay. You have number 3, the right to park or travel is part of the liberty of which the natural person, citizen, cannot be deprived without due process of law under the 5th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Kent versus Dulles, 357 US 116,125. Number 4, the right of a citizen to travel upon the public highways and to transport one's property thereon, either by carriage or automotive, is not a mere privilege by which a city may prohibit or permit at will, but a common right which he or she has under the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thompson versus Smith, 154 SE 579. Number 5, state police power extends only to immediate threats to the public, safety, health, welfare, etc. Michigan versus Duke, 266 US 478, which driving and speeding are not. California versus Farley. Okay. Number 6, the state is prohibited from violating substantive rights. Owens versus City, 445 US 662, and it cannot do by one power, e.g. police power, in that which is, for example, prohibited expressly by to any other such power, e.g. taxation in the domain as a matter of law, U.S. in Muti versus Daniels, nor indirectly that which is prohibited to it directly, Fairbanks versus U.S. 181. Number 7, traveling is an automobile on the public roads was not a threat to the public safety or health and constituted no hazard to the public, and such a traveler owed no other duty to the public, the state, he or she and his or her auto have an equal right to and on the highway, roadways as horses and wagons, etc. This same right is still substantive rule in that speeding, running stop signs, traveling without license plates or registrations are not threats to the public safety and thus are not arrestable offense. Christie versus Elliott. 216, is that, yes. I-131, 74 HE 1035. Also, LRA NS 1907 through 1910. California versus Farley, 98 CED 89,20. Okay. Number 8. Under the United States Republic's constitutional system of government and upon the individuality and intelligence of the citizen, the state does not claim to control one's conduct to others, leaving one the sole judge as to all that affects oneself. Mugler versus Kansas. Number 9, where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rule, making, or legislation which hold, abrogate them. Miranda versus Arizona. Number 10, the claim and exercise of constitutional rights cannot be converted into a crime. Miller versus Kansas. Number 11, for a crime to exist, there must be an injured party. Corpus delicti. There can be no sanction or penalty imposed on one because of this constitutional right. Shearer versus Collins. Number 12, nothing on the inquiry.
If any tribunal court finds absence of proof or jurisdiction over a person and subject matter, the case.
Talk to the microphone. Talk to the microphone.
I got it. If any tribunal court finds absence of proof of jurisdiction over a person and subject matter, the case must be dismissed. Louisville versus Motley. The accuser bears the burden, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 13, lack of federal jurisdiction cannot be waived or overcome by argument of parties. Griffin versus Matthews. 310 F Supra 341, 342, 1969. And want of jurisdiction may not be cured by consent of parties. Industrial Addition Association versus CIR 323, US 310, 313. Stare decisis cases.
Now, keep in mind, the case law is for reference point. This is so that people can look at comparative cases, see for themselves that it is established law. So the interjection of the case laws with the numbers are in there so that you can research. Are we clear? Now, keep in mind, those are just 13 points. Now, we chose 13 because 13 it governs the womb of woman. And because all government is fundamentally matriarchy, so that number of cases that we put in there was deliberate. That's a metaphysical choice. And the deal of this, because the lioness preserves and will aid and support the life of their young before any others. Do you understand? So that's also an appeal to the womb by the choice. Now, point. And the reason we put that, now keep in mind, these are 13 stare decisis cases that we put on the judicial notice that we've been giving people for, for the last 3 decades, minimally, generally, in that area. And these are some of the things that persons claiming to be Grand Sheiks of the Moorish Science Temple of America have been publicly saying that I was lying. And they call them Moorish lies, and literally made videos. Now, remember, stare decisis is harmonic with the common law, it's harmonic with constitutional law, it is harmonic, therefore, with Hermetic law, it is harmonic with nature's law and nature's God. So when they attacked me, they thought they were attacking me. They were attacking divine. See if they can beat her. Now, the other deal of it is, I think a lot of times when people see things related into an aggregate base like that in what they know are corrupt court systems, and a stare decisis issue comes out for a few people that stand for the principles of republic, because there's still a few who, which is a conflict that you'll see going on with them now. In all orders of government. There is no branch of operative government anywhere on this planet that will not see turmoil as we speak. And it's going to get worse until they are cleaned up and overthrown. That's a fact. Now, and like I said before, I'm not defending Donald Trump. However, Donald Trump represents the good angle. Are we clear? He's closer to the republic order of government than any of those knaves and ghouls put together in a well-packaged presentment, however they want to present themselves. It's not personal, that's just a metaphysical, honest analysis. All right? Now, them battling Donald Trump, they're not really fighting Donald Trump, they're fighting the people. Their target is the people who don't understand this from a metaphysical point of view are looking at Donald Trump. Donald Trump has flaws like us all. Do you understand? However, if they had eyes to see, they would be wise metaphysically to be careful their attacks on the people using him as the beating board to do so. Because there are other energies that's going to bring that stuff right into check. And they're not getting the crap off that they got off before some other generations, including 2,000 years ago. So you can chalk that up. They ain't getting it off. They think they are, they're not. Go ahead, brother, you got the mic.
Islam, just a real quick one, Taj, stare decisis. No state shall convert a liberty into a privilege, license it, and attach a fee to it. Murdoch versus Penn.
Now, and some of these grand chiefs of the Moorish Science Temple of America have been telling the people that I've been lying to them until that the Constitution set up a traffic court and didn't set up a consular court. And I challenge anyone to go into the judicial section of the Constitution for the United States, Article 3, and see where it set up traffic court. But I do say it set up consular court, which they are attacking vehemently like wild dogs. While they themselves were put in power to make and enforce law. And charged in the divine warning by the prophet for the nations, and that's plural, not singular. He charged them to bring these people back into the constitutional fold of government and enforce the Constitution for the United States. And everything that's been coming out of their mouths have been to attack anyone who has been enforcing it, which really shows their hand. But I think what's really been happening, truthfully, in the background is that the difficult they've been having to call the common people in the community has become noticeable. And they're charging us with it because we've been out there with, I apologize, out there with the people, you know, for so many, for the last few, 4 decades or so, doing the best that we can to help the people. And I think because many of the people relate to us in relationship to the divine and national movement, not to the temple, to the divine and national movement, there are 2 things. They're jealous, envious, bitter, and rather than take advantage of the people that we're sending to them and actually develop the community, they attack. But our interest in the people was not to compete with them. We're just doing what all Moorish Americans are charged to do. I think sometimes when people have the honor or allow the honor to hold the titles that they carry that actually belong to the people, they actually start thinking that the titles belong to them. And that they actually think that they can treat the people or mistreat them or not treat of them as they will, and then get angry when the people recognize that these people are unqualified and don't deal with them, and they think that someone else is doing the job who doesn't have the title that they've given them, or you're not part of our club type thing, that you're not a really guy. You really can't play basketball, but they keep losing the game. You're not a pro and stuff, And then you keep, 3-pointers on them, whatever. And they start confusing their own vanity and thinking it's you. How somebody think you're picking a fight with them and you weren't even paying attention to them? You didn't even notice that they were in the room. And they start thinking that you're their enemy. And you only notice them because they're making themselves noticed. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And you're addressing them because they're really like a bunch of kindergartners with feathers on, jumping around and screaming and throwing things. Trying to make you not ignore them. And not recognize how banal they are and how juvenile they are. However, our job is still to help the people. And so that's what we will address.
Wow.
But again, what Tamara read from the judicial notice that we've been giving people for decades, the grand chiefs, not all of them, because understand, don't necessarily apply what you've seen out of the activities of a few of being the opinions or positions of grand chiefs in the Moorish Science Temple. And the real problem that we have with them, with many of them, by not speaking up, many of the public has assumed that that's their policy overall, and it's not. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And so, whereas they'll show a video where they're supposed to be putting Taji guy in place, they'll not show the video where I'm at the table surrounded by sisters and others who were dedicatedly in support, thanking and trying to get information. They won't show that. But they were also jealous of that too. So they're the guys in the club and all the sisters are over here at the table with me. So they invite me to the other side of the room, all the way over for the roasting. Boy, it was funny. It was a roasting. But it was more humorous. And then they chopped it up and made a video like they put Judicata in place, tied his sneakers together and all. You know, it was funny. And they won't show the part where we, you know, the place closed down, we were outside and talking. And one of the Grand Sheiks, Sheik, who was leading the pack, he almost looked like he was getting ready to go into an epileptic fit because I mentioned the word jurisprudence, almost foaming at the mouth. That's how angry he was. You know, the kind of anger where you stop and say, is he for real or is he faking? Right. Is he trying to impress somebody or is he really serious? You know, you ever get in a situation like that where you're trying to contain yourself? I know this guy ain't serious. Well, he is. He shouldn't film this. Oh, but everybody's standing around with cameras and stuff. But, you know, they got out. And then that's why I told you before that someone's, I don't know if they slipped up or they was trying to get me to respond. They said all that, you know, concerning the Moorish Holy Temple of Science and all the work that Jurali did, you know, prior to 1928, so that's the dead arm of the law of the movement, dead arm. And that made me realize what I already knew psychically anyway, which is also why I've always done what I've done. But it was simply confirmation. But you ever be in a situation where you know that certain persons are extremely beyond corrupt and they're trying to make you angry, and so they slip up and say things that they really shouldn't say? And they call the civic part of this movement the dead arm of the Moorish movement. They admitted their position. Well, they had a speaker, but he admitted for the wolves that went around casting psychic attacks, didn't know the arm, didn't even recognize the armor, which means really they don't know the game. Go ahead.
Since you mentioned the word that angered or put somebody in a tizzy, I thought it
more than angry. The energy was, I wouldn't say bordering evil,
demonic,
but it was dark,
diabolical.
It was dark anger.
The word was jurisprudence. I'm in Black's Law 5th, page 767, jurisprudence. The philosophy of law, or the science which treats of the principles of positive law and legal relations. In the proper sense of the word, jurisprudence is the science of law, namely that science which has for its function to ascertain the principles on which legal rules are based, so as not only to classify those rules in their proper order and show the relation in which they stand to one another, but also to settle the manner in which new or doubtful cases should be brought under the appropriate rules. Jurisprudence is more a formal than a material science. It has no direct concern with questions or moral or political policy, for they fall under the province of ethics and legislation. But when a new or doubtful case arises to which different rules seem, when taken literally, to be equally applicable, it may be, and often is, the function of jurisprudence to consider the ultimate effect which would be produced if each rule were applied to an indefinite number of similar cases, and to choose that rule which, when so applied, will produce the greatest advantage to the community. Tarik, he's upset about jurisprudence.
And the other thing that made them angry, and this was when we were outside, when I mentioned the word jurisdiction, this other one foamed at the mouth and started doing the black arts.
Jurisdiction.
And I'm, in my mind, I'm just parrying. This is child stuff they're doing. And yes, and really got it, and said, don't be bringing that up around these Moors.
All right, real quick. Page 766, Black Law 5th, real quick. Jurisdiction. The word is a term of large and comprehensive import and embraces every kind of judicial action than the case law. It is the authority, jurisdiction, the authority by which courts and judicial officers take cognizance of and decide cases. Board of Trust than the case law. The legal right by which judges exercise their authority than case law. It exists when court has cognizance of class of cases involved, proper parties are present, and point to be decided is within the powers of the court. And then the case law. Power, authority of a court to hear and determine a judicial proceeding than the case law. The right and power of a court to adjudicate concerning the subject matter in a given case. And these de facto courts that are in breach of the Constitution
Now, what you
don't have jurisdiction.
Of course they don't. And it's not only on that point. I mentioned, the Organic Act of Congress, 1871, and what you find in it's sort of like disappointed for someone to confess what you already knew about them, but you wish they had grown up, is to see their attitude towards constitutional principles while foaming at the mouth every other 2 minutes claiming they love no withdrawal, and not recognizing how blatantly contradictory they are. They're so busy attacking me from a personal perspective, and it wasn't bothering me, getting angry because I wasn't bothered. And you could sense it and see it. Like somebody throwing stuff at you and it bounces off, and they're, oh, let me throw something harder. And it bounces off. And I'm eating my food, oh, he's really arrogant. Now I'm thinking this is what they're thinking. I'm not really thinking that way, but, I'm just looking at this juvenile activity, with these feathers on, So trying to be contrary to me and demonstrating every contrary issue to their own bylaws. From slander to wishing harm to every day, everything else. To condemning the Constitution, to condemning stare decisis, to condemning law, or mentioning anything like this around these Moors. You're contaminating, mixing this stuff with neutrality, and what I mean? If you could see the imaginary horns, they had sets on them. It wasn't like the two, it was like sets. Like there was, I'm on rack. Oh yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, if they really knew the ethers like they say they do, they wouldn't worry about Taji guy. They would worry they would worry about who was standing behind me that they didn't see. They're so busy doing me as a target. This is how you can tell people have shallow eyes. When they're going, you really lunch, and I'm eating lunch. And they couldn't even see the energy around You know, because when I move, they don't have to worry about me. They got to deal with them. Their attack wasn't on me. Their idea, their intent, they're going to get this little guy with these cheap sneaks on him. You know. He's mixing through all these stuff. You know, and they're so busy. You know what kind of reminds me of? This kind of reminds me of someone taking advantage of a small child that come out of the alley, and the child come out of the alley, they didn't notice that the whole family was coming from behind them, and they're taking the child's candy and potato chips and smacking the child around, and next time you bring lunch out here, we're taking that too. And then the big uncle and the aunts and everybody was coming out of the alley going behind them, and we saw them, oh, your hair was just so messed up, and let me just straighten your clothes up and stuff. You will another bag of chips. It's like one of those things. That's how you know that these people don't know spirit. They really do not harmonize. But a lot of them know they just been getting away with this dirt for so long, they're arrogantly confident that they're going to continue. That's really what it is. This is why I don't excuse them, because I know half of them know, because I know they're dark priests. Not unknowing dark priests. A lot of people make excuses for them. They're not unknowing. They know exactly what they're doing. They just think that it's not enough energy here to counter them. That's really what it, you know, they've had this field day on this planet for so many generations that they're just arrogantly confident that no one's going to counter them and that no one has the strength or the capacity to counter them. So truth is treated like dirt. Truth is treated like it's an interference. You talk about Constitution, you're like some magistrates, we were in South Jersey, and Miss Lim, I think he was around 18 then, they had stopped him in the driveway or something like that. Ross Mariah's son. And the magistrate's name was Schweitzer. And Miss Lim was starting to study stare decisis, and he presented stare decisis in that venue that they call the court. And Judge Schweitzer said to him, "You don't have a right to declare your rights." That's exactly what he said. That magistrate said to him, "You don't have a right to declare your rights."
Deprivation of rights.
That's how arrogant he was.
Deprivation of rights, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, case got dismissed and everything, but now I think Miss Lynn was about 18 then. And we're so proud of him because one of the strategies that we did when we came in, before we came into court, we had printed up a lot of bifolders with stare decisis on it and passed them out into the people and took some of the slots they had, you know, they have the information out in the hall, put the stacks in them, we were giving people coming in, stare decisis. And some of those cases that you see right there. And anyway, the case, he ended up throwing it out because he stood on the square. You know, he's looking at this young teenager coming in, exercising rights. Talking about he needed lawyers. You know, they can't represent free people. They're aliens, they're foreigners. I reserve all my rights to due process, to trial, by nationals of my own peer, and hold you to your obligations to that Constitution. You don't have a right to declare your rights. He was mad as hell. The case still got dismissed. I don't know if he would ever told you all about this when he came through, but good story for you to hear from him. In the future, I might ask him to write about that and also pull up scripts. But that's how arrogant they are. You know, because they pretty much know, like I always told you, that the court systems operating in North America actually not run from here, it's run from England. You know, under Unum Sanctum. And they're arrogant because really the policemen are actually their henchmen killers. So they'll send, like, say for instance, like the girl that they murdered in Baltimore.
Right.
She had put liens on them.
That's right.
And and won.
That's right.
And so they were sent out to assassinate her. They killed her and shot her little boy.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And then tried to blame me for it. Yeah. So some grand sheiks in Moorish Science Temple said, Todd, you guys sent them out there to kill her. Yeah, yes they did. You'd be surprised. For teaching her, you know, I never met her personally, but she started studying and exercising rights. But that goes to show you how arrogant they are, that anyone that exercises their rights are become a target. And that the people who don't know actually take the side of the military, mercenary, commercial mercenaries, which is the side that Grand Sheik Sharif and a lot of them others who made that video, they take their side, not our side, and say that they are the government. And say that Moors that are exercising judicial powers or consular issues are not government or anti-government, when we are indeed the republic. We are the government.
Islam.
You know what I mean? And it's our duty, whenever anyone in position of trust and authority breach their position, all rights revert back to the people.
Islam.
You know, because the birthright is yours in the first place. It's not theirs. Government gives you nothing. They're only in place to secure and protect your rights. And when they breach, they're already fired. You don't need to vote. Your vote is your action. There's a plebiscite. You know, stupidos vote. Nationals do plebiscite. Oh, you fired. No, you can't fire me. I'm gonna screw you, and I ain't gonna cut your grass, and you're gonna pay me anyway. And then the dog that I bought to sick on your children with the tax finance I got from you in the first place, you gotta buy. You gotta pay for more defense against this alien terrorist dogs that are biting your children that I bought. Really sick on your children. This is basically what they're doing. But the network is so strong that they're arrogant because the whole thing is corrupt from top to bottom. And the problem is that the masses don't know what it is. They keep thinking it's some alien from some other country with a box cutter knife in a cave that's doing stuff to them, that took that building down in Oklahoma, that bombed Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that tore them buildings down in New York and all this stuff. You know, that was these people that they've been calling their government. Inside job.
Islam.
And taxpayers, that's the name they call them, paid for that destruction. And play dumb and act like somebody else did it somewhere else in a cave in Afghanistan. You know, that's because of their own hypocrisy. But the deal of it is, while those types of things go on, nature, this is the issue, is that nature is cognate in rejecting all of that type of activity, and that they don't see that it's nature, it's awakened against them. They think that it's you, me, and they're looking at these things. They have no idea what they're dealing with. But I charge the darker ones in the hierarchy for not informing some of those minions that they got out doing their dirty work. But they're going to sacrifice them to get their stuff done, but they ain't safe either. They're so used to being safe doing their dirt. That's their position. And so I always say, and I always remind people not to be complex about this. Just look at Uranus and Saturn together in partnership, and you can take it from there. Just do research on both of them ruling this Aquarian light right now. Not one, both. And then see if they're going to get this stuff off again, like they think they're going to get it off. And like Dwali said in religious controversy, said the sun stands at high noon, and yet they still cannot see. Look at what that's really telling you. Meaning that the shadow work that we all need to do on ourselves, and that's part of why you're here on this planet, that you got so busy that you forgot that there's a cycle time involved. but we're looking at ordinary calendars.
Right.
We forgot the bigger wheel. You see the point? The clock of destiny. And so we haven't noticed the sun return because we're busy looking at the inner circle. And all of our calendars are based on that inner circle. So we're measuring, I mean, not wrongly, but measuring the sun and the moon. And so our calendars, sun and moon, right? Oh, yeah, that's 9:35 and stuff. Well, that's not sidereal. Not really.
All right.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but when you forget that, that's when you're in trouble. Point made is because the principle of stare decisis is not preserved among the masses. It makes the masses victim because they forget that which is real and that which is artificial. And so what has happened is that the corpse, the dead, has become such a part of the social order and is set by those who know to bleed the living and transfer the energy. And because the people who have limited sight don't see it, they're actually like children in a field of beasts with limited defense. And the beasts think that no one's going to defend them or that no one can. That's how entrenched they are. And they're so arrogant with it now, they're coming more and more out of the open. Not unlike that woman who said, when they were having that press conference a few weeks ago, "We gotta eat the babies." You know how much she really meant that, because it was been going on anyway. She feels safe to say it. Talking about the environmental, changes and global warming. We gotta eat the babies. Meanwhile, people you've been calling congressmen already had legislation ready to sign, just like they did with that Patriot Act, already done, trying to see the mood of the people. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is messing up all of their stuff, and so they're pissed off at him. They need to get him out of the way so they can advance this genocide thing.
On that, Todd, I want you to give me a little latitude here, because of the date that's
What do you
coming.
think?
November the 13th. There's a Supreme Court case that is coming up that is huge, seemingly, on two fronts. One, the case is about Comcast and the the private commercial paper, the energy in the billions and billions that's given to media companies that are of European, Germanic, Albion descent, right? So Comcast, it wasn't Time Warner, but it's another one, and a small Asiatic company is suing because none of the private commercial paper, the energy, is being submitted to the Asiatic companies.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening is, so he sued them at a lower court. Comcast lost. The other company, another judge allowed them to win. They moved it to the appellate court, and the appellate court said, you know what, the Asiatic is right. Billions are going to you guys. There is something under the civil law that's wrong here. So Comcast said, oh no, we're not taking the L. We're going to take it to the Supreme Court. When they took it to the Supreme Court, which happens on November the 13th, the person who's arguing for Comcast has allowed the Donald Trump, they each got 30 minutes. He's allowed Donald Trump's JOD, the judicial representative, to get 10 minutes. And what they're arguing on is removing the decision of 66, that afforded, that afforded the copper-colored people, just first, coming out of slavery, the right to have, to do business and have a right to monies going
Which
away.
would be a counter to unum sanctum, which has been the operation.
The issue is, in order to make it go, the argument that they're making is, for this to hold up, you have to prove that it's 100%, you're being denied 100% because of the color of your color of your skin. And if the Trump side wins, they're going to remove this ruling that means all the copper-colored people officially go back to slavery. There will be no more civil rights.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
That's right. But the argument that they're making on television, YouTube, is, oh my goodness, they're getting rid of, they're risking it all, and Donald Trump is, technical obviously, is removing the whole platform of civil rights. Well, if that platform of civil rights is removed, that means you have to definitely claim your nationality.
That's right.
Of course, it's very clear.
And your birthright. And it goes back to bloodline, and it's a good thing for those who are conscious.
Now, and this is back to people not understanding stare decisis and people not understanding res judicata. Now, the whole civil rights platform, which is a 14th Amendment operation, is an operation for monkeys and not for humans. That's number one. So they got people to agree to be monkeys to get what you call limited privileges disguised as rights that were never really operable, right? And are in their nature unconstitutional. As an example, let me make a point. When you're dealing with national and international law, you're dealing with pedigree, histories, nations, and nationalities. When they got these people claim to be spiritual guys to get people of Asiatic African descent, i.e. Moors, to call themselves melanated people rather than identifying themselves. People of darker hue, all these, these little, what they would call safety words and safety phrases, and then have them attached to the human family and legitimized. And of course, you've got to make some operative rule for such beings that are clearly not identified. There's a designation, but there's not identification. And no such people ever were part of civilization, never were, and were not a part of any construction of any treaties or constitution. Therefore, no constitution or treaty can apply to them, because the treaties are made between Britain and Moors.
Islam.
It wasn't made between Britain and people of color, of melanated hue, of darker order of skin, of whatever crayons they want to talk about, and then make it legitimate and then call it civil rights.
Islam.
And it has become a dead part of culture, but given legitimacy. And so you have generations that have been raised under that and think it is a lawful reality when actually it's fake, totally. Does not apply to human beings, it applies to corpse or the dead. That's what 14th Amendment is.
Islam.
It's a corporate person or corpse. Now, because it's been giving a sense of legitimacy, and then they put guys up who kept saying Jesus and God and Allah and stuff to run around and talk about people's color of their skin. It's not how you refer to human beings. You refer to them by their pedigree. And when you're talking national, international law, you're talking national law, you must name the nation, then you must name the nationals, and then the different categories of citizens within that nation state in relationship to other nations and the different peoples and categories of citizenship within those nation states as they relate. and you have international law, which is rooted fundamentally in the common law, which is the measure. And whenever there's a controversy, the universal issue going on around the world is consular issues.
Islam.
No different than you'll see. I think there's a video that people have been sending around lately, where all the consulates of Israel are shut down because of a strike all around the world. And so that's their operations in all the nation states. Those are what? Consulates. Because you're dealing with diversity of nationality.
That's right.
You know, and surprisingly, you know, back to the point, stare decisis and res judicata, of some of the attacks that some of the grand sheiks of the MOORS-MUURS temple have been making on me, saying that I made up consular court and that it's a fraud. When the Constitution that they're supposed to be supporting established it. And they say that I'm lying, that it established the traffic court, that these Moors don't want to observe the law and ride around with no licenses and stuff, and they're saying stuff like that. Isn't it really interesting? Now, the deal of it is, while people are caught up in emotions by them making their position known publicly, when these youth wake up and really start understanding,
It's no
believe me, they'll come tie you guys sneaks, and they'll be trying to take their sneaks, and they better have some sneaks on because they're going to be doing some running with their coattails in the wind. When they recognize much of their injury that's been happening to them on the street, what these commercial mercenaries, that these people they're on their side against their own blood.
And they have the regency and the power ties, these temples,
that's what they were signed for.
to sign a writ and make it virtually all go away.
Let's keep it more simple than that. If I had it available to me at the moment, you know, because I used to keep it up there, but I think somebody took some of the books out. The letter that Prophet Nobrali wrote a couple months before they assassinated him, that he commanded to be read before the temples, then you'll understand the very thing that I'm saying, not from me, but from Prophet Nobrali himself. You know, and of course they made a Tarik guy for that too. I didn't write that, Prophet Nobrali wrote it. Why don't they cuss him out?
Taj, you had it. It was hidden, Taj, and you unveiled it again.
Oh yeah. Oh, do you happen to have it?
Of course I did.
Well, you got a lunchbox sandwich. I hope you got an extra sandwich in it. But again, the point that I'm making is stare decisis covers much more than people think it does on the surface. You know, and I think, well, I don't think, I already know it has a purpose, a function to it. Why it is not commonly known amongst the masses when the masses should be well aware of this type of framework of thinking relative to law.
We read this for the audience a couple weeks ago. Taj, you want me to bang it again?
Yes, I want you to bang it again.
MOORS-MUURS Temple of America, Home Office, 3603 Indiana Avenue.
And make sure you say no Drew because it's not Judicata.
Noble Drew Ali, founder, Chicago, Illinois, January 18th, 1929, to be proclaimed in every meeting.
Now let me mention to you, now read that date again.
January 18th, 1929.
Now understand, 6 months later they assassinated him.
Dear brother,
Good.
Islam, I'm glad to know that I have a few faithful Moors among you all, and I desire for them to know the truth of the divine and the divine truth. To know the truth and the divine truth.
So and means plus, doesn't it?
That's right. So there's a truth and the divine truth. There is a host of jealousy about me and the movement, now by the same people of our side of the nation that claim it was only a joke and unreal. But now, since they have found out from the government officials and the nations of the earth that this is the only sole foundation that all Asiatics must depend upon for their earthly salvation as an American citizen. They are working, and I'm going to break down American citizen. They are working every scheme that they can to disqualify me so they themselves may take charge of the situation. I have notified all these things to you long ago in the past. It is through the faithful Moors that contribute to the movement and uplifting funds, the ones that pay their divine respect to me, and the movement will be remembered. That is why I'm calling upon all faithful Moors to increase their faithfulness to me, your prophet, and your divine Moorish movement. I need finance. Let me pause right there, Taj. The finance is in all capital letters, which indicates something beyond ordinary. I need finance, and the Black's Law definition of finance is going to blow you away. I need finance, and I need it bad. Never before have I needed finance as badly as I do at present, that I may shove aside the discord that is facing the nation. It all comes through jealousy because of my fame and nobility. The nations of the world will not recognize the movement without me, the prophet, being the head. It has been proven by my work in which I have performed in the last few months, because I was at the governor's inauguration to present the Moorish divine and national movement. And I will be at the inauguration of President Hoover for the same cause. Signed by Noble Drew Ali.
Now, was that a political, civic act, or was he sitting in the corner praying somewhere? He was presenting the Moorish divine and national movement.
Yes.
He was not talking about the temple. He was talking about the relationship to the movement, which is worldwide.
Islam.
And then they called some of these grand chiefs, some of whom was barbing me, roasting me at the Majestic Hall after the trek, called that the dead arm of the movement. This is why they don't read that letter. But of course I knew that anyway. I didn't expect them in their anger towards me to admit it, trying to attack me, and not knowing that that's a jewel of exposure. I don't need to expose them, they expose themselves. They're so busy being jealous and angry because they have not been doing their job, but they've been holding these people's titles that belong to the people. They have not been doing their jobs, and yet they've been taking millions and millions of Federal Reserve notes from these people for decades and produced nothing. From transportation funds, to building funds, to funds for schools, but they're dressed quite well. Not unlike Pastor Bigfoot. And they don't like Taji Guy because I won't play with him. Or corrals around them with banners and badges. And so they don't sanction me, so I'm not a real guy. My mother made me. I keep telling them that. I don't know where they keep getting this idea that they made the Taji Guy or can unmake the Taji Guy. My mother made me, and my mother sent me. And I can prove that. But they can't prove no nether world nothing. They can say all they want to say. Anyway, stare decisis. So and this is another thing, when you're looking at organization and operational organization, you're looking at protocols. Or like if you have an organization, you have what you call a mission statement. You have bylaws, constitutions. And you can use the constitutions and the bylaws and the mission statements, which will give you a guide point and a guideline that tells you the path that the corporate organization in secession must adhere to in order to be viable, lest it is dissolved, if you get the point. So constitutions in social order are constructed for what you would call continued life by corporate secession. And so this is the guideline. And this is so like the agreement that that we made with some of the Germanic tribes that come here with us is the treaties and the Constitution. Many adhere, and most of them betrayed, including people on our side. That's what our problem is. The Moorish divine and national movement of the world was put in place to make that breach obvious and to correct the faults. Are we clear? And for you to take your part and take your place among the affairs of men to help get this work done. It's not to glorify any individual beings whatsoever. And this is where he meant when he said, the world will not recognize you, without the prophet at the head. They're talking the principle. What is the stare decisis that set this up? And he says, the world will recognize you by your attachment to the Moorish divine and national movement. And I think some people are upset when you recognize what the prophet said and don't confuse that with the temple. The temple is a branch of the movement. It is not the movement. And this is back to some of them thinking that they own the prophet. When the prophet is universal, they're going to tell you, you can't speak about the prophet because you ain't in our temple over here where we're still in the people's finances. You got to come over here through us who are still in the people's finances and act like you don't know that that's what we're doing, and then you got to add to the pot while we steal some more of it. And every time we have an affair, we got to rent someplace else because we done robbed all the finance for all these years, and you're not supposed to notice that. And then you're not supposed to write anything, even though the prophet said our press is our most powerful weapon, and don't mention that to the people that we've done this to the prophet. That's why they don't like Judicata. That's just for starters. Well, they thought Judicata would be intimidated. Judicata ain't intimidated. They'd be better off messing with Godzilla. Go ahead. Give Tamara the mic, please. Stare Decisis and res Judicata.
Islam, we just have an online question for you,
Yes.
Sheik. What is your opinion on ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery?
That presentment is a fraud and is a psychic attack. Now, they want to know why? All right. See, one of the things what is called is when you're setting a psychic attack and you're setting a narrative, is you set up an argument that appears to be valid or having foundation, but is built on a false premise, and then you accept the false premise. Anything you built on it thereafter is false. Are we clear? Number one, slave is a connotative word that's applied in what you call an attitude or an action. And in contemporary terms, it is not real. Slave comes from Slovakia. It's actually an identification of European Germanic tribes in Slovakian nations who were subdued by Red Russians. And because they were subdued, that subduing itself was giving a connotative meaning of suppression. And thus, slavery has a modern, not ancient, connotative application. It's not a true meaning, it's a presentment. So therefore, a people who are Asiatic African descent are not slaves, they're bound freemen. But if you set up an organization where they accept that term as an identity, they're actually colored. At that point, true law or jurisprudence doesn't apply to them. You see how clever that is? See, a person who doesn't have multiple eyes or layered eyes can't see that. A person who can see it can see the trap and the trick. This is why, like, if you pay attention, like one of the things that metaphysical things that Drawley did or presented to us to protect us from the what you call connotative linguistics. He says you're not Negro, black, colored, or Ethiopian. And so when people look at that on the surface, they'll look at that as saying these are not, we've been called these things, but that's not who we are. True. It's actually a metaphysical statement. It's giving you a stare decisis principle to deal with on multiple levels and from synonyms to antonyms. And then you look at them and you get a clear comprehension of stare decisis and res judicata. Once then you apply it in everyday life. In doing so, you actually liberate yourself. Now, you know what the implication is intended to be, but a person who can't read or accept that as a goodwill statement, when actually it's a trap. Again, why do we do what we do? We want people to be able to recognize those things immediately and stop biting them gingerbread cookies in the woods.
Because you bring in the boogeyman. Now, now Tarik, I mean, while we're here, Tarik, you started it. You started it.
Right.
While we're here, there's just on the same line as Tamron's question. Somebody says, and I saw this online, and they, just frustrated because they're losing some battles for one reason or another. We won't go there. So they said, no, I'm really an American Indian. I'm not a Moor. I'm an Indian because all of the contracts and all of the treaties, forget the piece of friendship right now, Tom, all of the treaties that they showed me on TV are for Indians. And to that you say, what?
All right. Now, when Pedro the Moor navigated the Nino for Colombo, Cristoforo Colombo, took him to the Atlantis Islands. Their missionary operations was actually to Madagascar and Hindustan to take over the spice trade of the Moors. These are the records. These are the facts. These are the historical facts. Pedro, instead of taking them around the Cape, now remember, because of Calpe, the Moors had a fort there for hundreds of years. And Calpe is that rock that you see them using the insurance companies calling the Rock of Gibraltar. That's Calpe. That is Tarik. That is the mountain of the Moorish general Tarik. That's what that means. Gibraltar is a corruption of Tarik, which is the mountain or the hill of Tarik, the Moorish general. So they could not go across the Red Sea. They had to go around the Cape of South Asia, which is called Africa. That's South Asia. I repeat, for those who really don't know real geography before the maps were changed, what you know as Africa today is South Asia. Although we later call it Africa, it's South Asia. Are we clear?
It's not.
So they could not go across the sea because of Calpe. All right? And so their mission was to go around the Cape of South Asia and come up to Madagascar. That's why you see them doing all those cartoon movies with Madagascar with the animals, and you see them having the fez on. These are signals they're telling you. To take over the spice trades and the gold trade and the porcelain trades and stuff like that. That's part of the Silk Road that they're bringing up in history now that's actually ancient. You got to know what you're looking at. Now, hold on. So Pedro the Moor navigated the Nino, and instead of taking them to Madagascar and to Sinde, which they call falsely India, that ain't India. Is no damn such thing. Let's get this clear. No damn such thing as Indians on this planet. Let's get that clear too.
Oh my goodness.
Let's get that clear. Now, for those of you who are scholars, those of you know part of the human family, just write this down, do some research, and you start talking to some of the Hindustanis that are here that have been going along this bullshit, this Indian bullshit, because it's bullshit, and ask about the Mauryan, Nanda, Gupta dynasties of ancient Sindh.
Mauryan, Nanda, Gupta dynasties of
Mauryan, Moorish, Mauryan, Nanda, Gupta dynasties. And a little over 2,000 years ago, we renamed Sindh as Hindustan. Are we clear? So you're talking about Perot, Sindh, Hindustan. Ain't no damn India. Are we clear? Let's get that clear first. All right, now let's get that out of the way. Now the missionary work was to take over the spice trades of the Moors, but he took them to the last of the Atlantis Islands, now known as Boricain, Dominica, Haiti, etc. Are we clear?
Puerto Rico,
Yes,
and Haiti.
to what you know as the Arawak and Taino, and that in the great Caribbean Sea. So you're dealing with Carib Moors with dreads.
Locks.
Hold on. And so they knew they didn't make it to Hindustan, and so they say, well, damn, we got played. So we'll call it Hindustan of the West. And so they made up this term, West Indies. And so the first of the Moors that were called Indians is actually the last of the Atlantis Islands. Not the central, not the north, but the islands that they call now Trinidad, Boricain, falsely called Puerto Rico, Dominica, Haiti. They're the first to be called Indians by the European conquistadors, i.e. Inquisition conquerors. Under the Spanish Inquisition, made up the word Spanish after Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand merged their kingdoms and married, and then they ran the Moors out of Al-Andalusia. And Andalus, you got the feminine and the masculine name. Al-Andalus, Al-Andalusia. Andalusia is what is modernly called Spain. Spain didn't damn exist in the ancient world.
Islam.
Let's get that straight too. So, when the Red House fell, 1492, that's why it's used as the gauge year for them entering the great Maghreb, or the West, Morocco, most extreme West. It ain't evening salat, it's geography. And it ain't the evening sun, it's the morning sun. The east. All right, let's go on. And so they say, well, we'll call them West Indians. Now, I ask anyone that knows geography, history, and scholarly, and anything scholarly whatsoever, and the pedigree of humans, are the people of the islands Indians? Is North America India? Is Central America India?
No.
Is Americana, which is the islands on the Pacific and the Atlantis, is that India?
No.
Is North America India?
No.
How the hell are we Indians? It doesn't mean that they haven't called us that. But I'm telling you how the word India got its root in America. In reference to the Moors. So that's why when you look up treaties, they'll have treaties, Indian treaties, you'll see Moorish treaties mixed right in it, because it's a designation of Moors, but it ain't Moors. Just like Negro is a designation projected towards Moors. It ain't Moors. Color is projected towards Moors. That ain't Moors. People of color is projected to Moors. It ain't Moors. Melanated people is projected to Moors. It ain't Moors. All of those are terms and not identities. Don't mix them. If you accept them, you're now dead. That's how the birthright is stolen. It's very simple. That's what the brand system is for. Once you accept a brand, you're off the platform of descendancy. It's not opinion, that's a fact. This is again why you'll see such emphasis on the slander. Now, most of you, logically, most of you are here except for not even, probably none of you except myself, are old enough to remember when your grandmother or your father, if you called them black, you had a fight. You want to fight? You want to get a fight? Call them black. Call them Negro. You had a fight. But you need to know why, not that. The way that many people look at that today is really not what it is. Their concept of what they think it is. Like, see, y'all babies to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so I have a memory of reference that you don't have, which is logical. Just like you'll have a memory and a reference point that your grandchildren will hear about, but they can't connect. It's a data issue to them. Now, to give you an example, and this is again of why we choose certain things that we put on the flash drives. I'm going to go into the Dungy case of 1853 to 5, and show you the nature. See, the deal of it is, and this is back to understanding the nature of stare decisis. Now, the principle of stare decisis is established law, correct?
Islam.
All right. So we're going to go on the flash drive as an example. Lincoln defends Moore, right? To give you an example, put it in perspective. And this is again why it's important for them to do what you call book burnings, and for them to exercise what they call index librorum expurgatorius and index librorum prohibitorum. And this is so that they can control the narrative. And so the controlled narrative is what you call Reconstruction history. They were referred to as Reconstruction period. They were rewriting books, are we clear? It didn't end, it continued even to contemporary times. And so this is why, like, when people really don't understand basic etymology, don't know how to read or how to trace words limitations, and will take things out of context because it's presented to them out of context. So let's look at this case law. Now, let's deal with, say, most of these children now, maybe, and even with their mothers and fathers who don't have a background, right, in history and sociology. If you mention Abraham Lincoln, they're thinking President Abraham Lincoln, and they're thinking Emancipation Proclamation and things like that, right? But people who know, he had a life. He was a lawyer, right? So let's talk before he was president, right? So this is a case that Lincoln did before he was president, about 5 years before he was president, right? And when you go into, like, say, if those of you who are doing research, you go into microfilm and you go into the old newspapers and you look at the time when Lincoln began to consider running for president of the United States, the Republic. The satire that was pushed against Lincoln, the same way you like the satire that they're doing with Donald Trump now, they call him the Orange Man, right? That's satire. And they slander him, call him racist, and call him everything but that he really isn't. That there's no background other than them making stuff up and saying that he's doing stuff that he's not doing. Do you understand? Because they don't like him. not because they have a foundation. Meaning they just literally lie on him, for other agendas. But anyway, Abraham Lincoln's nickname was Africanus. They called him Africanus I, right? And that was his nickname because they knew two things that were possibly true and possibly how they looked at as questionable about his grandfather being a Moor. And then Lincoln having curly hair, a little bit curly hair, and kind of a dark complexion. So a lot of the pictures that they show of Abraham Lincoln, they lightened him up because he was darker than what they show him to be. And then when he was countering the unum sanctum policies of colonialism, which was reflected in that later thing, the 40 acres and a mule thing, which would pretty much giving us our land back, which they was also mad at him about that too. So a lot of things that they don't tell in history in the books, the way they present it is not, not spoken of, but is their real motives of operation. So anyway, now Abraham Lincoln, you'll find in the newspapers, some of you who see this, you'll see Abraham Lincoln, they have him dressed in Moorish garb with a sword in the newspapers.
Can you zoom in on that?
Now that's Abraham Lincoln. Now you all seen this, it's on your flash drive anyway, but
Yeah.
if we were projecting it, you would see it up here. Now that was from the period, from the time, right? This is before he was president. In other words, they were saying that he's messing with the unum sanctum doctrine of discovery. And this is the issue of the Europeans having the right under the Pope of Rome, under the Spanish Inquisition, to go westward and breach the treaties and just take land and murder the people off. And so a lot of people don't see the Trail of Tears and other things as being related to that policy when it actually is. Are we clear? Mm-hmm. All right, and so they show him in Moorish garb because we're the people of the land. This ain't India and we ain't Indians. You understand what I'm saying to you?
That's right.
So let's get this out of the way. So now, this is a brief of the case. Abraham Lincoln, there was a cartoon, they made a cartoon, right? And they nicknamed him Africanus the First. That was Abraham Lincoln's nickname. So if you don't see them saying that in the school books now, because then they'd have to tell the history that goes with it, and then you would know that these people that they're talking about ain't no Indians, they're Moors. So this is another reason why they don't tell all that history. Are we clear? But this law case, just like anything else, law cases sometimes expose things they don't want exposed. So this is the black laws that many of these people embrace, who claim to be loving these people and caring about anybody. Yeah, right. You believe these Negro, black, religious pastor leaders like they love these people, you better get your ideas together. They work for the unum sanctum operations. They're paid off. That's why today, in the more modern world, they have a 501c3 skull and bones agreement that was set up by Lyndon Baines Johnson, so they make sure that they follow the party line of the dumb them down religious dogmatic concepts of Jesusness, and then promote them under the 14th Amendment that was never properly ratified to make them U.S. corporation stock, making them think that they were citizens and going to get a benefit. Well, that's what their job was, and you ain't supposed to figure that out. Which is another reason they don't like Judicata, because I don't play with them. I already know who they really are and were. And don't hesitate to tell them. You know, they're assholes for starters. They sell out for beginners. Now, this is the black laws of 1855. And those of you who want to make reference, you can go right on your flash drives, you know, and pull it up and look at the brief of the case.
That's right.
Now, among 10 original Abraham Lincoln documents discovered in DeWitt County Courthouse in Illinois is a bond quote unquote, for costs in the William Dungy versus Joseph Spencer case. Now, it was written but not signed by Abraham Lincoln, and the bond was part of an interesting slander case. This is why they would fight. Do you understand? Because it was a slander, but you need to know what the slander was for. See, the slander was, they would slander you under the black codes, and if you didn't counter it, then they would enforce the black codes on you, steal your estate, and then kick you out, and if you were married, take everything, all inheritances and everything. And so it wasn't that they were making fun of your skin in the sense that people keep talking now. The slander made you not heritable and was a setup for targeting you, because the next step was stealing your estate. So it's extremely serious. It's not, whether somebody likes you or not. They were setting you up to steal your estate. No different than if the church wanted, if you were wealthy and the church wanted your land, they'd accuse you of being a witch, torture you and murder you, then share your estate between the sheriff of the town and the lawyers of the town and the church. That's how they got wealthy. And they did it over and over again. That's another part of history in North America that they don't promote, that the church's wealth came from murdering women and stealing their estates. And who keeps on bringing their children to these churches now? Women. And then charging Jesus with being a part of that fakery. And these people are murderers and thieves from day one. They ain't fall. It's who they are. Period. And no one has the guts to tell the truth on them, because they're always saying Jesus and God and Allah and Yahweh and everything. Yeah, right.
Quick something to just add to that real quick. Another issue with the church, and the practice of the so-called priests not allowing them to marry. When they married, what used to happen before they changed the rule, when the priest died, the land would go to the so-called wives. And the church said, we cannot have that.
That's the real reason.
So you can no longer marry. So when you die, we can get the property.
No,
you're living in the parish with your wife. If you die,
you're exactly correct.
Yeah.
You're exactly correct. Now, I loaned an old, very old, rare book that I had to Brother Abdullah. I was supposed to get it back from him. And it was on the Inquisition. Book, old, very old, valuable book, Inquisition. You're exactly correct. The people think that, the chastity of the priests, because their wieners were soft or whatever. No, and because they prayed to the Lord. No, is that they didn't want the wealth to go back because they were killing women to take the wealth in the first place. Let's get that out the way.
Right.
Let's get it real here. Let's get the real deal. Their records, they had what you call vagina pair. And a vagina pair is, they look like this. They were so arrogant. So, y'all got this, right? You really need to know the history. Y'all, these people really don't know what they're dealing with. So I'm putting this up here so you can come take your camera and take a picture of this, take it on to your wives that keep taking their children to these churches. I'm giving you a general drawing of how they look. And they even made them in silver and dressed them up. Right? And they would take women and spread them eagle, tie them down, jam this in their vagina, and like a vice, slowly open it up and stretch them and tell them to confess to the devil and that they've got a devil. And of course, how much pain can you stand before you confess? Well, whatever you say is peanut butter sandwich, whatever. Like, until they literally crack the pelvis.
That's right. That's
You
right.
want? Yes.
That's right.
Yes, the church, your pastors and priests and cardinals and bishops. That's how the church, you see all the grand buildings they got? That's where the finance came from. Sacrificing women, calling them witches, which means wise women. And if a woman had any intelligence or wealth, the church, they'll say, they want their land. Because remember, all the Asiatic culture before the dogmatism of the church came in are matriarchies. So the women were a target because government in its nature is matriarchy. The wealth was passed through the matriarchy. Are we clear?
That's right.
So they charge them with one, they would charge them, take your turban and tie it in a knot. You know the ancient line on the pancake thing? Mm-hmm. Symbolizing locking down the pineal gland, put them on a fulcrum in a lake or a pool, wherever, and dip them. This is where they got waterboarding from that they use today, right in the military. That has a history. Oh, yes.
Islam.
They did that to women on a common basis, particularly here in North America. And so the major cities where most of those murders took place are called Salam or Salem. They take one A out. And they still maintain them. It's like Salem, New Jersey, go down Salem, New Jersey, go in that area to the old trees, and you can even feel the energy. Still there. That's like for real. And they would take these, and then they'd turn them until she starts splitting. And make her confess the devil. Of course, it'd kill her, That was the intent in the first place. She didn't survive. So the church would take her wealth, and they split part of it with the municipalities. Yes. Taji didn't make that up. That's their real history. And so that's vagina pair. And they also had some that you put in the mouth, too, to make them confess and bust the jaw. And they did that to some of these evil women that happen to have knowledge and wealth and land, and it belonged to God. Government Ordinance Department of the Bishops of the Church, or the bishopric. Yes.
They were also doing it to those women who knew the magi, the craft,
and the real
stars,
and the real history.
And the history, Islam.
Yes.
Stay with William Dungy.
But we're going to go back to Dungy. But keep this in mind. This is part of your history here.
Islam.
So this is again why women are intimidated and mentally, and they're groomed and don't know why they do it, but they do it. They take their children to church every Sunday because they're scared if they don't, priest is going to come and get them. That's why. That's really where that origin is. It ain't no worshiping or love of God in heaven of Jesus. No, it's the priesthood. Fact. And then many of them so traumatized they just suppress it and pretending that, this masculinity of scared of women is no, it's the priesthood. And then they keep delivering their children to these demons and then blaming some mystery demon that never did a damn thing to them. And that guy in the ground with the red hair and stuff, and the horns and shit, he's doing something. No, it was them priests in them robes behind the pulpit that did it to him. And it's doing it to him today. Is why some of them grand sheiks don't like Taji guy, because I know some of them are part of it.
Islam.
I can see right through them too.
Islam.
And I ain't intimidated by them. Demons. Go ahead, sis.
Okay, so this is this where they got I guess what they still do today, what they call the speculum at the gynecologist's office?
Put it this way, when you start saying this back then type stuff, your concepts are wrong. They perfected the systems. It never ended.
So they still have it?
It never ended.
Islam.
It never ended. They just do it underground and in the bottom of chambers of churches. It never ended. And the ritual of the blood, drinking the blood, the wine symbol, that's like for real. And the wafers for the body, it's a ritual on the surface, is real underneath. That's where you get the executor's chamber beneath the church. That's where the ones who didn't give their wealth to the priesthood, you didn't agree, they threw you in the dungeon. It's called the executor's chamber. Write that down.
Yeah, it's there.
Because it's part of the real history. That's why people start thinking hell. As a matter of fact, it is hell, and that's the name of it.
That's right.
The executor's chambers. And that's in the law book too. We're going to get to that after I finish reading the William Duncan. Say it again.
Put the spelling on the board. Grand Sheik, they use those speculars every day in hospitals and clinics, and they call them all your annual exam. But when I learned that, I was like, no, baby, we can't do that. We're not doing that anymore.
That's beneath the church. Sometimes they use an H and sometimes they use a K.
Right.
Exchequers. That's where you get check from. You know when you cash checks?
The treasury too.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
So it's the debtor's prisons, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now you see why the Constitution disallows them. The Constitution is not their culture, that's our culture. They're operating exactly against it. That's why some of the Grand Sheiks don't want you to be talking about Constitution stuff and saying it's going to get you killed. Because that's who they're working for, Rome. That's why they're so sure you'll get people hurt. When they should be speaking up for the people, shouldn't they? Shouldn't they? I mean, shouldn't they? Why won't they? They're sympathetic with Rome. The very ones that murder all the prophets. And they're a part of it too. Phonies. That's why Drawley said, be careful more. Some of these people wearing turbans and fezzes will be trying to put you back into slavery. They're among you. How do you know who's who? By studying stare decisis. By studying de facto and de jure. By studying the republic versus the democracy. This stuff ain't hard. You just give people to know what to look for and pull the galls off their eyes, take the shades off, and let them alone. Don't judge them, they'll see for themselves.
And
It's just that right now they believe in these people.
that's EXCHEQ.
Yeah, X-C-H-E-Q.
EXCHEQUER.
All right, come on.
EXCHEQUER. Escature. Islam.
But in transliteration, they'll do the H and the K, because that's where you got checked. But the executor's chambers, that's beneath the church. And anyone that didn't pay off the bishops under the Spanish Inquisition, this is where you get Thomas D. Torquemada. Now, I'm going to show you the relationship where people keep thinking this stuff is going. Your IRS is exchequer enforcement of Thomas D. Torquemada under Inquisition Revenue Services. It's just now called the Internal Revenue Services.
Instead of the Inferno.
Yes. Who was talking to me last night? Someone was talking to me last night about that sister that worked there and started exposing. And they set her up and gave her 2 years in jail for telling the truth. And ruined her life to make sure she couldn't get a job. Oh, yeah. But anyway, let me go through the William Dungy case. Now, keep this in mind.
She should have been like Eric Snow.
Say it again?
She should have been like Snowden. Yeah.
Oh, well, it isn't really that. You know, part of it is telling some and not telling it all. Not unlike Martin Luther King that start threatening to tell when he should have just took the refrigerator door off. Because once you cross that line where you're not operatively subservient to them, you already know that your life is done. Whether they physically remove the body, they call it neutralization, or whether they just ruin your life. Either way, you lose. When you decide not to serve Rome, you may as well just come out the box, come out the costume, because once you cross that line, your life is over. You cannot serve Rome and serve divine. They don't go together. You understand? And once you cross Rome, you're done. So you may as well just tell. Like when Martin Luther King starts saying statements like, my people are refugees in their own land.
In their own land.
He broke his Masonic oath. Now he was 33. Now he's in service to Rome.
Right.
Not in service to divine. You know, when somebody smacked him upside the head with a brick when he was walking across that bridge, and he said, something must be wrong with these people. And you don't make statements like that because you're serving them. You know, your job is to keep these people passive while they get their asses kicked.
Right.
And march them around, burn up their energy so they can pay the state for tickets and getting out of jail, to the Khazarian lawyers, and everybody marches around, feels sorry for you, you know, and start talking about colors and all this other stuff. Never international law.
No.
You know, and you know, they're going to make them think you're somebody, and you know, not human rights violation. And police brutality, not terrorism. You know, that's their job, to keep you in these things that mean absolutely nothing but look like you're doing something.
And ritual songs.
You know, you don't cross the line when they've given you, you know, some weed and some drugs and some girls and stuff, and while you say Jesus in the front of you, and you're in the hotel room playing all these swing from the chandelier games. You know, I don't know what it is.
Oh, I know.
Let's get over it. What it is. And then you don't start telling the truth on the room when you've already been bought off.
Yeah, you started talking about
And your job is not to tell these people to enforce international law. Your job is to tell them, keep hope alive. And one of these days, Jesus is coming to bring you a sandwich to pass the plate and stuff. You know, eating all kind of stuff. You know, you one day Jesus gonna give us some bread. And you know, whatever. Anyway, let me get back to William W. Cake, because every time I think about these guys, it makes me angrier. Now, I'm going to read this through. Put this in context. This is 1855, right? Not 1955 when they started marching these civil rights, 14th Amendment, civil liberal mortus, you know, keep hope alive guys who faking that they love Jesus type thing. Selling these people out under the 14th Amendment, thinking that they were being citizens and they were really being stock on the stock market. And then marrying some of them, not telling them that the marriage certificates were bank bonds owned by the Pope, which also owned the womb. And the eggs in it, too. Anyway, that's fact, not opinion. Among 10 original Abraham Lincoln documents discovered last summer in the DeWitt County Courthouse at Illinois is a bond for costs in William Dungy versus Joseph Spencer. Now, written but not signed by Abraham Lincoln, the bond was part of an interesting slander case. Now, family disputes that degenerated into slanderous, name-calling feuds frequently appeared in antebellum Illinois circuit courts. Antebellum means this is the period before the Civil War. Are we clear? So the Civil War ain't happening yet. Remember this, all right? So we're putting it in context. Are we clear? So antebellum means before the Civil War. So they degenerated into slanderous name callings, and those slander cases were commonly brought before the court. Such cases reflected the intent of American slander law to safeguard an individual's good reputation in the community against petty character assassination. In other words, that's a crime. Are we clear?
Yeah, clear.
Abraham Lincoln realized the value of reputation and declared in his first printed political speech that every man is said to have his peculiar ambition. I have no other so great as to that being truly esteemed of my fellow men. Now, one unique slander case, Abraham Lincoln argued, pardon me, I gotta make some corrections here. Because I'm going down, it's going up. Yeah, I had to move the cursor. So one unique slander case, Abraham Lincoln argued at the Wilkes County Courthouse in Clinton, Illinois, in the May and October of 1855 terms of the court, involved much more than a defamation of character, and I suggest that Huck Finn's friend, Jim, might have reconsidered his plan to escape to freedom. I reckoned at about 4 in the morning, I slipped in just before daylight and swim ashore and take to the woods on the Illinois side. In August of 1851, William Dungy, a dark-skinned young man of Portuguese descent, now keep in mind he's Portuguese, right? So understand that your different nation states are political jurisdictions, but not necessarily your pedigree. Are we clear? All right. There's only two peoples on this planet, Occidental and Orientals. And then you have your nation-state categories that come under them. Are we clear?
Teach right there, Tarik. Give me 30 seconds. Occidental, Oriental.
Occidental means the Germanic tribes, which are your modern, but it's also referred anthropologically as your modern man hybrid. Orientals are original people of the planet, direct from the earth. Are we clear? Or first beings on the earth. Are we clear?
That looks like you and me.
That would be called Oriental. And Occidental are your later hybrids, generally referred to as your Germanic tribes. Are we clear? And so when you know the real anthropology and nature of human, you understand that the mixtures and the blendings made the other nation states. Are we clear? But there's nobody on the planet but Orientals and Occidentals. Are we clear? All right. Now, in August of 1851, William Dungy, a dark-skinned man, young man of Portuguese descent, married a European woman, Joseph Spencer's sister. So Joseph Spencer, who is the defendant in this case, is the brother of the wife of William Dungy, who is Portuguese and his wife is European. Are we clear? Now later, people call them white people and black people, but that's totally a fraud. Are we clear? But these terms have been used for slander purposes. Are we clear? All right. In other words, a caste system. Are we clear? Artificially constructed. Now, so a family quarrel ensued, which became so bitter that in January of 1855, Joseph Spencer, a European, claimed throughout the community that his brother-in-law, Black Bill, was a Negro. Those were the slanders. Are we clear?
That's right.
So now William Dungy is called Black Bill and a Negro. All right? Both of these are slanders. Now, since 1819, Illinois state laws permitted quasi-slavery and restricted the immigration of free blacks into the state. Now, free blacks is also a legal status. Are we clear? Now, you don't hear that now, but these are legal statuses. Are we clear?
Yeah.
Now, so in 1819, Illinois state laws permitted quasi-slavery and restricted the immigration of free blacks into the state. as other northern states passed personal liberty laws granting additional rights, granting additional rights to quote-unquote free blacks. Remember, none of this is constitutional. These are program rights. Are we clear? Illinois state toughened the stance against them. In 1848, Illinois state constitution required the General Assembly to pass such laws as will effectively prohibit free persons of color, legal phrase, from immigrating to and settling in this state. Meaning such persons that's under those tags, cannot settle in the state. Now, those prohibitions against human rights were passed as the Black Laws. Wow. Clear. And went into force February the 12th of 1853, the same date of the future Emancipator Lincoln's 44th birthday. William Dungy faced losing not only his reputation, but his marriage, his property, and his right to remain in Illinois. Section 10 of the 1855 Black's Law stated that every person who shall have 1/4 Negro blood shall be deemed a mulatto. These are different common terms that were given. Are we clear? All right. William Dungy retained Abraham Lincoln to quash the possibility that he might be judged a Negro and therefore suffer the severe penalties under the 1853 Black Laws. Abraham Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln filed his declaration charging Joseph Spencer with slander on April 17th of 1855 and sought $1,000 in damages. And keep this in mind, $1,000, this was money. This was not fiat. Are we clear?
All right.
A game of legal chess occurred during the first hearing in May, and Joseph Spencer's attorneys, and his attorney's name was Clifton H. Moore, M-O-O-R-E, and Lawrence Weldon, W-E-L-D-O-N, also Europeans. And they filed a demurrer to Lincoln's declaration asserting that his charges were insufficient in law, and Judge David Davis agreed that 2 of Abraham Lincoln's 3 charges were faulty. The case was continued, and Abraham Lincoln was allowed to amend the declaration. And at the next term of court, which was October of 1855, the Dungy case was argued before a jury. And this is basically a copy of the bond that they had issued, that's on the record, that they issued into the court. Are we clear? All right. Now, according to Joseph Spencer's attorney, Lawrence Weldon, Abraham Lincoln's talents as a trial lawyer were evident in his argument for William Dungy. Lawrence Weldon stated that Abraham Lincoln questioned Joseph Spencer's character by demonstrating how Joseph Spencer went from house to house gabbing that William Dungy was a nigger. Attorney Lawrence Weldon emphasized that Abraham Lincoln's tone and pronunciation had a curious touch of ludicrous, which instead of detracting seemed to add to the effect. In other words, Abraham Lincoln had a sense of humor.
Right.
Abraham Lincoln further undermined Joseph Spencer by using humor to persuade the jury that there was reasonable doubt regarding William Dungy's race. The attorney, Lawrence Weldon, recalled Abraham Lincoln's statement, and this is the statement, quote unquote, from Abraham Lincoln. "My client is not a Negro, though it's a crime to be a Negro. I repeat, this is Abraham Lincoln's quotes in the court. My client is not a Negro, though it is a crime to be a Negro. No crime to be born with a black skin. But my client is not a Negro. His skin may not be as white as ours, but I say he is not a Negro, though he may be a Moor. Abraham Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln, Judge Davis interrupted, scarcely able to restrain a smile, in other words, he was smirking. And he says, you mean a Moor, M-O-O-R, and not Moore, M-O-O-R-E, talk about the lawyer.
Right.
You know, so they're making kind of fun over this. M-O-O-R-E. Well, Your Honor, says Lincoln in retort to the magistrate, says, well, Your Honor, Moore, M-O-O-R, not Clifton H. Moore, pointing to the lawyer, replied Mr. Lincoln with a sweep of his long arm toward the table where Moore and I sat. My client, I say, may be a Moor, but he is not a Negro. Abraham Lincoln. Though the account may be apocryphal, Attorney Lawrence Weldon's recollection was characteristic of Abraham Lincoln's style. Abraham Lincoln then demolished the defendant's witnesses' testimonies, and attorneys Clifton H. Moore and Lawrence Weldon had secured several depositions from residents in Giles County, Tennessee, near the Dungy home. And these witnesses stated that they had personally known the family and that the white community had regarded the Dungys as Negro, quote unquote, or of mixed blood. Under cross-examination, Abraham Lincoln argued that the testimony was hearsay, as the witnesses admitted none of them lived within 30 miles of William Dungy's residence.
That's right.
In October of 1855, the jury returned a verdict of guilty and granted William Dungy $600 in damages plus court costs of $137.50. Abraham Lincoln's charge was only $25 for fee, which Lawrence Weldon considered minimal. In other words, Lincoln argued the case on principle. It wasn't about the money. To avoid an appeal to the Illinois State Supreme Court, Abraham Lincoln persuaded William Dungy to remit $400 of the judgment in return for the defendant releasing all errors which may exist in the court record. Under Illinois state law, the defendant could not appeal the verdict, but could appeal only on errors of procedure of evidence. And Abraham Lincoln had taught Joseph Spencer an important lesson in domestic relations. Now, the back part of this case can be found in the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency in Springfield, Illinois. Now, the deal of it is, the principal argument had nothing to do with how people perceive this stuff today. It had everything to do with estate. In other words, next thing was his estate. Do you understand? And so the youth, most of the youth today in the last couple of generations, their concepts on why their great-grandfather would fight if you call him black or Negro, their concepts were wrong. It's based on estate. So now they think it's an insult on the darkness of your skin type stuff. No, you were being set up to be robbed. First they denationalize you, then they come after your estate. That was the next move. And so slander case, and of course he lost. Now $1,000 then would be close to $1 million now in actual value. Anyway, so stare decisis relates to cases that are settled, not to be disturbed, not to be changed, not to be argued. And so and this is for the public out there, since we have so many operatives have been telling the people that we've been lying to them with the case laws that we've been putting or giving people in the judicial notice, and are not surprising but somewhat disappointing. You know, some Grand Sheiks of the Moorish Science Temple of America, which would include one of the Grand Sheiks they call Sheik, and others who led a wolf pack going around making videos with Tarik and telling people that we were lying on to people and making this stuff up. Those are stare decisis cases that they themselves should have been defending on behalf of the people. And so stare decisis is not what Judicata made up. Stare decisis is established law. Constitution principles set aside, not to be dirty, not to be modified, not to be altered.
And res judicata.
And res judicata. And the abridgment of those principles by anyone that claims to be a judge is a violation, and that person should be unseated and sued, and a bond should be leaned against them every time that they do it. Anyway, I want to tell you all, thank you all for coming out to the House of Reawakening Minds. We appreciate your support. And for those who are listening, I hope we've done some good, although, you know, again, in some areas, you know, I wish I were better to communicate with you. I trust that you will trust yourselves and start using your common divine sense. And everything we present to you, we always tell you, don't accept necessarily what we tell you. Research it. Use discipline. Use discernment. Use judgment, not biases. Don't talk stuff when you don't read. And I know some Grand Sheiks of the Temple told the people for Judicata not to mention jurisdiction around them, but I'm going to do it anyway. But I'm not in their club, and I'm not under their control, and they can't buy me off. And we will be doing constitutional enforcement at every opportunity. And we will say publicly that Drew Ali supports that. And if they want to fight me, go ahead and fight Drew Ali. You know, don't worry about Judicata.
Before we close, I just want to quickly say that, remind folk that we got an exciting opportunity on November the 16th. The Grand Sheik, the Amir Tarik Bey, with our Voices in Truth Walker, are doing a erudition tour of the Masonic Temple in Philadelphia and the City Center, City Hall, to help unveil our true history hidden in plain sight via signs and symbols. So join us November the 16th, and that location is 1 North Broad Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We're going to have a great time. It's going to go all day. Starts at 10 a.m. Islam.
We want to thank you all for coming out. We're thankful for Grand Sheik being here 2 weeks in a row, catching up, getting back on schedule. And next week we will have our brother Abdullah Bey. So we ask that you will come back and support us. If you can't support us in person, please support us online. And we always are open for our Cash App and our PayPal. We thank you for your support and your love. Islam.
Islam in peace.
In peace.